Welcome to round 4 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge live on TRTN. Good evening, good afternoon and good morning to all race fans tuning in. Of course, as always, I am Regan Clark and you join us halfway into Season 1 on our second week of racing here in the UK from the confines of the HCCL GT4 Challenge, and reeling from last week's race at Brands Hatch, you now join us for round 4 at yet another MSV venue, the Snetterton circuit. Founded in 1951 and comprised in its newest configuration, the Snetterton 300 layout, introduced in 2011, of 12 turns and a touch under 3 miles of FIA Grade 3. Like many British circuits, it started its life as a military installation. And while originally intended for use by the RAF, it was later reassigned to the stewardship of the United States Army Air Forces from 1943 to the end of the Second World War. From Snetterton's hangars were housed several B-26 Marauders from the 386th Bombardment Group and a handful of B-17 Flying Fortresses of the 96th Bombardment Group. After the end of World War II, like many RAF installations, Snetterton Heath fell into disrepair, ultimately abandoned in 1948, where the airbase returned to the ownership of Fred Riches, the original landowner. Not long after its closure as a military installation, two budding members of the Aston Martin Owners Club, Dudley Coram and Oliver Sear, approached Riches with the idea to build a motor racing circuit on the now abandoned airfield. Riches agreed on the conditions no racing take place between 10:45 AM and midday, and that racing ceased before evensong, as Riches was a church warden for the local area. Snetterton holds races each year for the British Touring Car Championships, British GT Championships, British Superbike Championships and TCR UK. Between 1960 and 1963, it held non-championship rounds of Formula 1 known as the Lombank Trophy. Of its 4 runnings, Innes Ireland, Jack Brabham, Jim Clark and Graham Hill won in Snetterton's confines. Elsewhere for open-wheel races, it was lower divisions that ran at Snetterton for several decades. But in the modern day, open-wheel racing at this venue is all but extinct, with the last race being ran in GB3s, a subtype of the Formula 3 design, during the 2023 GB3 season. Looking at our schedule then, coming into round 4 of the championship, it's the same as always, with 20 minutes of free practice currently underway, 20 minutes of qualifying coming up, and 60 minutes of racing, with 1 mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres. Weather-wise, it's not going to be looking at any chance of rain, but we'll be starting at around 5 AM local, meaning it's going to be quite dark conditions to start off with the sun slowly creeping over the horizon here in Snetterton. In regards to new drivers for today, only one, M. Wright in the number 54 Porsche 718 Cayman. So, today Snetterton hosts round 4 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge, and with Vladislav Mizin relishing in 2 wins in a row after victory in Brands Hatch, the Ukrainian appears fired up and ready to try for a hat-trick. But things are heating up towards the front, and with wider corners and more straightaways than Brands Hatch, Mercedes could face both barrels of an onslaught from McLaren and Chevrolet later on today. More on that in a moment as we begin the discussion of the championship standings. On the current state of affairs, we're on board with Matthew Copsey in the number 97 Porsche, looking into the championship standings. Vladislav Mizin leads with 66 points, putting himself 10 points ahead of Asahi Ota and 12 points ahead of Christian Lebay, giving our podium currently only 12 points in between first and third. Manuel Verzi, I should say, is in 4th position with 46 points. Flitzer Flop only 2 points behind to round out that top 5. Matthew Copsey only 4 points away from being in the top 5 himself, currently 6th place and 5 points ahead of Steven Sutton. Timo de Tosto in 8th position, ahead of having a look on the standings here. This is rather unfortunate that I've forgotten, but with that being, I believe, yes, as a matter of fact, that is Matinee in 9th, Walker in 10th. Always still struggling to get used to those new acronyms on the chart there, or the abbreviations therein. So following with Copsey as he heads currently down towards Montreal, down at turn 2. It's going to be an interesting one in the championship. Of course, we're now at the halfway mark. We'll be heading into Zolder for October 11th, and on October 18th, we'll be heading to Imola. And for the last 2 rounds of the championship to follow, the Hungara Ring and the Red Bull Ring, with the season wrapping up just at the start of November. So 14, a little under 15 minutes left to go in free practice before we're on to the discussion of those qualifying predictions. And as always, it is looking very, very tight up in that top 10. But first, the discussion of the balance of performance. And this is the worst case scenario for Mercedes and Vladislav Mizin. They find themselves only with 2 kilos taken off of the curb weight of that AMG. As, oh, I do believe we've run into a spot of bother there. Do bear with us. Well, we're not entirely sure what's happened there, folks. It seems that the server's been wiped, but we are back here on this grid and back into another 20 minutes of free practice. It does give us an extra 5 minutes about to play with here, but sadly without any news to cover, not an awful lot to be talked about outside of this grid. So here's hoping that the free practice session can get out of the way. What it does give is drivers an extra 5 minutes to squeeze in to this grid. Right now, just heading up onto the track is Christian Labey, having yet gone without a win this season. Labey has been tantalisingly close to victory here in the GT4 Challenge. We know of his talents through last season. We know of his talents elsewhere in the world of GT4, of which he'll be competing in later on tonight at the penultimate round of the NLRL Solo Multi-Class Endurance Championship from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We've also seen his exploits over the course of the last week of broadcasting, including Wednesday this week, where we saw him battle things out, but to no avail, as it turned out, in Watkins Glen. We stay on board with Labey on his way currently down through Agostini, down towards Hamilton. We are kind of just tentatively watching the state of affairs for the server stability over the course of the next 18.5 minutes, just hoping that we don't end up in a situation like that again. So to bring back up last round's results, it was another victory for Mizin. Now 2 in a row puts him 10 points ahead of Asahi Ota and 12 points ahead of the man on screen at the moment, Christian Labey, who is yet to go for a win this season. But looking at the predictions for qualifying, which we'll discuss later on, it is looking very, very hopeful this time around for the Chevrolet. And as mentioned in those balance of performance statistics before we were rudely interrupted by a server disconnect, it is the worst case scenario for Mercedes, as its 2 main adversaries being McLaren and Chevrolet, where we've seen the likes of Flitzer Flop and Anthony Valorio and Christian Labey as those premier talents for both brands have really been able to excel up against Mizin over the course of the season, but have seldom reached the checkered flag before him. This is the worst case scenario because now they have that on the ground advantage. 11 kilos for McLaren taken away and a record high for Chevrolet. 40 kilograms shed off of the Camaro coming in to this round of the championship. It is going to give a very, very spry spring in the step of Christian Labey and several Chevrolets to be on the field with him as well. I think to recount another driver that's going to see a great advantage over the course of today's session, you look no further than the number 4 of Dion Helgelien, another one of the Chevrolets on the field. He just makes his way down towards the line here to start a flying lap. Behind him is Fabiano Bartoletti. Up the road from him is Vladislav Mizin. We now see with, at the moment, the 2-time race winner this season, having made a late entry into the championship at round 2, has been able to nonetheless usurp the lead off of Asahi Ota, much to the chagrin of the number 55. We've known for the longest time as well that Vladislav Mizin has been quite adamant to avoid any time in the limelight for these qualifying predictions over the course of the last 2 rounds gone, where he has been a sort of logical black hole to study, where he's always been just out of the way of the times to where we can't accurately gauge what to expect of the number 1 coming into these rounds. I'm quite happy to say that in the next 16 minutes, when we get on to the discussion of qualifying, with 20 minutes of qualifying coming up the road on the grounds we don't disconnect again, it is looking for the first time that we actually do have palpable information to hand on what to expect from Vladislav Mizin. In terms of Snetterton as a track, it is quite a complex one. It's a real love it or hate it track for the MSV lineup. Some drivers, very, very big fans of it. I know Cam Walker was not a particular big fan of this track, and he's gone on record to label quite a few other tracks he's not particularly fond of in the MSV lineup, including Alton Park and where we visited last as well, Brands Hatch. However, he does seem to have an affinity for Donington. Let's see if we can go and find Walker. There is the BMW. And back on the discussion of balance of performance, we did laser in on the point towards the high end of negatives there for McLaren and Chevrolet. But looking at the rest of the field, Ginetta gaining 7 kilos, Aston Martin right alongside them gaining 7, BMW gaining 8, and a rule of extremes for Alpine this time. 22 kilos makes them the joint heaviest for ballast alongside resident Porsche, who have occupied that bottom step of the balance of performance charts throughout the season, and that has been to great annoyance really to quite a few of the Porsche drivers in the championship. Now to find just a few of them, we've got Wright here who's joining us in the Porsche, of course one of our new drivers for today, and is really up against it by joining in at one of the worst times for Porsche in terms of balance of performance. We'll be adamant to see what the 54 can do on his debut race here in round 4. Matthew Copsey will also be joining us as always in the 97, and if he's on track at the moment, though I don't actually know if he is, would have been Byron Forrest. So it seems that the weight of expectation for Porsche falls firmly onto the shoulders of Matthew Copsey. Now, we saw what he was capable of in the last couple of rounds, and he had a very, very spry run of things over the course of Brands Hatch. Looking back into those results as well, Matthew Copsey just escaped being on the podium for Brands Hatch, but he was very, very fast throughout that race. One of the best hustles I think we saw over the course of round 3 of the championship. Looking further down the line, it wasn't the greatest of results to follow that round before at the Nürburgring, where in which he finished down in 11th after that first lap incident. It has definitely been a redemption story then since round 2, as it has put a bit of a stain on his reputation for this season. But Copsey really gave us quite the example to go by over the course of round 3. So coming into another MSV destination, and these tracks almost follow the similar trend of being quite dense for corner variety. Snetterton probably the best example of such. You've got just about every type of corner one can imagine for a racing track. It does offer great variety and hence great opportunity and great richness for racing capability, let's put it that way. It does give the drivers quite the plentiful variety of opportunities to take on one another for position on track, and it does make for a very engaging hot lap. We stay on board with Copsey. 13 minutes left to go in free practice as we bring up the times so far. Mizin fastest by 7/10 of a second to Christian Lebay. Dion Helgelian, the fellow Chevrolet there as well, now up to 3rd. We watch with Matthew Copsey on his way to the line. Where will he position himself amongst the Chevrolets of the top 3 and the Mercedes topping the charts? As he crosses the line, he's up and ahead of Helgelian. Behind him there is Wright on the timing charts now, having crossed the line after Copsey, I believe, looking at the charts, there was the 23 and the 24, so that would have been Jordan Minards with Aston Martin, and the 24 would have been Cam Walker with BMW. The 58 crossed the line but a moment ago. That's Timo de Tosto with Aston Martin. And regarding De Tosto's finishing results in the last couple of races, now looking throughout these standings, De Tosto finds himself 8th in the championship, has yet to appear outside of the top 10, didn't compete in round 1, did compete in round 2 onwards. De Tosto, worst result so far this season has been 7th place, best result has been 5th. So he's aiming at another top 5, and it seems to be this upward trajectory from De Tosto. We've seen in other championships as well, he knows how to get his hands full, he knows how to work well under pressure. There is quite a lot that he can prove in today's race moving forward out of round 3. So we'll keep an eye on De Tosto's progress among several others over the course of round 4 of the championship. I do want to focus in just quickly on Dion Helgelian. Now, he's been a very rare sight on the field so far, only making a handful of appearances. The number 4 for Chevrolet is now down to 5th as M. Wright goes faster. Now, actually don't have a full name for Wright, but Helgelian takes it back off of him for 4th place. Those two very, very close to one another. They're looking just over a 10th of a second, a 10th and 3,000ths to be precise. So discussing Helgelian, he finds himself on the championship charts down in 23rd. His previous result was at round 2 of the championship where he finished 13th. But this is definitely a massive step in the opposite direction for Helgelien. He finds himself rather comfortable right now where it stands inside of that top 5. Now, bear in mind, these drivers are trialing different setups over the course of today's free practice session. Moreover, considering we'll be in a night race and night qualifying by proxy, there's going to be a lot less ambient heat to play with. We're looking at around 16 degrees for the actual race itself. Right now, it's only 12 degrees on track and in the air. Anthony Valorio goes 4th fastest, now up and ahead of Dion Helgelien. And another new livery, I think, there for the 41. Now, he's been rocking plenty of different colours. Of course, he was able to finally break the curse back in the Competizione Performance League and dethrone a 7-win-long race streak for Christian Lebay, becoming the first other driver in the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series to take victory, and he did so over in Watkins Glen International. So that was a great result on that day for Valorio. Let's see how he can carry the momentum as he gets back behind the wheel of the 41. Well, we saw he did run incredibly wide on the exit of turn 2. We'll catch on with him later on. Next towards the line at the moment, the number 979, Flitzer Flop into the pit lane with McLaren. Behind him there, you can see our new driver, the number 54 of Wright. Not much is currently known about this one. He was very late to join up for round 4 of the championship, but he puts himself 3rd fastest, does so by 32 thousandths of a second to Matthew Copsey, the fellow Porsche, inside of that top 5. So great expectations here for the newcomer. He's got quite a level playing field to go up against. There's not a lot of expectations from his contemporaries. There's more just intrigue from us here in the commentary box at this time to see whereabouts does this brand new driver slot in amongst the talent already rich and dense with racing opportunity. These drivers have had pardon me, they've had fantastic careers so far. We've seen it's a very dense talent pool here in HCCL. And now we see up to 3rd from behind Wright. Now up to 3rd goes Asahi Ota, the round 1 race winner. The number 55 for Aston Martin puts himself ever closer to being within that 1 second barrier to Mizin. Right now, the only driver to find his way beneath 1 second has been that of Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet. Mizin still sits atop the charts, currently uncontested at the end here of free practice as we've, looking at it here, about 8 minutes left to go before the start of qualifying. Mizin still looking on very solid form. We've seen him run that stealth black livery over the course of his last 2 entries, and now it's really going to be playing into his hands here because it's going to reduce visibility over that Mercedes massively. He's going to disappear into the night on the way he's been moving so far, and he's hunting a hat-trick of victories after taking 2 in a row in the last 2 rounds of the championship. A late entry, but now stands atop the charts. This is definitely quite the compelling story for the number 1. Right now, it's business as usual in that top 3. Lebay and Ota, who were the scorned rivals of round 1 in the wet and wild conditions at Monza for the season opener, they fought vehemently for position, ultimately going in favour of the 55 Aston Martin when Asahi Ota took victory for the opening round of this championship. Lebay has yet to been able to recover that kind of performance since, and we've seen he's definitely been toying a lot more with the setups on the car. This is a bit more of an experimental approach we've seen over the course of the season from Lebay compared to the more clear and narrow performance we get to see over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League. He's definitely taking a bit more of a wild approach to things, able to sort of toy around with more logical extremes here. And this is really quite a dense talent pool for him to go up against, much more to his speed, I would definitely say, especially considering that he did have to fight quite hard with Asahi Ota for the championship last season in the multi-class championship when GT4 was introduced. These drivers do have history with one another in this league. I think it would be naive to just contain everyone within the same pool of just this championship. You need to only really take a look around to see the various champions still competing on this grid heading into the GT4 challenge. And, well, you take a look around the field and sadly, I don't believe we can find the first one I was going to be speaking about, but all you really need to do is take a look at Asahi Ota. Now, he took the championship back in Season 1 of the multi-class from the Porsche Cup division. He took quite the resounding victory. It was Manuel Verzi who took the victory for the M2 class beneath it. Then looking further around, of course, we mentioned before that Christian Lebay took the championship in Season 2 in the GT4 category. And then you've also got drivers who have worked alongside and contributed towards winning teams. For example, over in the HCCL Formula 1 Championship, Mercedes took the constructors, and one of the drivers in that two-driver lineup was Matthew Copsey in the number 97. Well, he's now behind the number 97. I'm not sure if he was behind the number 97 Mercedes during that season, but one can speculate. So you have drivers here with solid pedigree inside HCCL, and then you have drivers as well that we can definitely point out have been racing in other series and have been doing rather well there as well. Timo de Tosto took a sprint qualifying victory in the now defunct 8th round of the SME in the NLRL Solo Multi-Class Endurance Championship over in the Hungaroring, the first of its kind to be red flagged on weather concerns. De Tosto took the fastest time and was rewarded half points in what has already been a very confusing and controversial way to end a round of a championship. We'll be catching on with the Solo Multi-Class Endurance Championship later on today, but right now, as the end of free practice looms for us here in round 4 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge, we're on board with Vladislav Mizin. Now that gap having dropped from 6/10 to a little under as we get closer and closer to the half-second mark. All the meantime, Asahi Ota has yet to penetrate the 1-second barrier. 4.5 minutes left to go then before the start of qualifying. To bring back up then where things stand in the Drivers' Championship, for those of you just joining us now at the end of free practice, heading into round 4 then, after 2 victories back-to-back, Mizin now leads 10 points ahead of Asahi Ota, the number 55 on screen at the moment. Then behind him in the championship, only by 2 points, making a 12-point gap between first and third, is Christian Lebay with Chevrolet. Manuel Verzi in 4th position, but he's liable to lose more as he's not currently in this round. Flitzer Flop in 5th place, looks to be inheriting that position off of him. Matthew Copsey could make his way into the top 5. He's got 40 points, 5 points ahead of Stephen Sutton in 7th. Timo de Tosto in 8th position. And then Martin Mattei in 9th with 24 points. Cam Walker into the top 10 with 22 as we exit round 3 and into round 4. So we'll follow on board with the next driver down towards the line here. It's the number 1 making his way out of Coram and in towards Murray's. And whilst we've got the opportunity then, let's see if we can go and catch on board with Vladislav Mizin for a comprehensive tour here of the Snetterton circuit. Now this is the 300 configuration introduced in 2011. As we head down the centre straight, he's actually going to pull that one in, so we'll have to go and catch on board with another driver here. Flitzer Flop looks to be the next liable candidate on his way down through Coram. So with any hopes here, we can potentially get another lap here, but as the minutes draw fickle in free practice, we may be a little bit starved for choice. We'll see if Flitzer Flop's going to be able to give us a run around Snetterton as he stays away from the pit lane. Let's get on board then with the German in the number 979 as he heads down the centre straight. It seems a recurring theme then in these MSV circuits to kick off that opening corner with a long sweeping right or left-hander, in this case right-hander, down at Riches at turn 1, then into the first of our major overtaking opportunities here at turn 2 at Montreal. Then heading down towards Palmer here at turn 3, running in direct parallel to turn 1, then this time in the opposite direction from a right hand becomes a left hand turn as we head now from Palmer up to Agostini as our next overtaking opportunity in a slightly shorter than turn 2 open hairpin left as opposed to the hairpin right down at Montreal. On the exit now of Agostini, down towards the very sharp left hand kink here of Hamilton. This is where things do become a little bit jarring for drivers, and it's really a make or break thing as to whether or not drivers end up enjoying Snetterton as a circuit. Now on the exit of Oggies on our way up towards Williams, it can be considered a little bit claustrophobic in that middle sector, a little bit muddled compared to the shorter 200 layout, which seems widely more favoured. But now on our way down the Bentley Straight, on our way to a very jarring set of corners to slap back to back here, as it's sort of a closing gradient hairpin, if you can make any sense of that, in through Brundle, then into Nelson, as it's effectively a curved braking zone. into an almost Hislops style chicane, for those of you who know the Alton Park circuit, another MSV destination, then through the bomb hole corner, and I'm not going to be saying that plenty of times over the course of today for simple reasons, down through Coram, this long sweeping right hand to then juxtaposed by the almost imminent run, as you can see the barriers coming up to indicate the run in towards the last corner here at Murray's. This very sharp left-hander, plenty of run off to the right-hand side though, so drivers could find themselves getting side by side if they really want to push the envelope out. But into the pit lane goes Flitzer Flop as our unofficial tour guide of the Snetterton circuit. Next down towards the line, the number 818, Tom Wells. You'd think then, in a track that has quite that complex middle sector, that Ginetta could find their way creeping up the order. Well, as the solitary representative of Ginetta in this championship so far, still much is riding on the shoulders for Tom Wells coming in to round 4's qualifying in about 30 seconds time when free practice wraps up. There's 3, potentially 4 drivers still left to set times in this lap coming. The 32 is not far from Coram, and by proxy Murray's could find his way across the timing line for one more lap before the end of free practice. Right now we're on with Tom Wells. To bring back up then for the third and final time before qualifying the balance of performance statistics, Ginetta find themselves in a bit of a peculiar zone here, right in the middle. Not a lot has changed, and not a lot is going to feel too extreme in either of the directions for weight reduction or weight gain. Ginetta with 7 kilos find themselves level with Aston Martin and BMW by only a single kilo difference. It's not going to stop the spry performance of Ginetta, hopefully, over the course of this round, with 60 minutes coming up of racing. First, though, comes the discussion of qualifying, which kicks off in a moment's time. We're still on board with Tom Wells, the only other 2 drivers left on track, Copsey and De Tosto for Porsche and Aston Martin before the end of free practice. And it's this straightaway section here. Now, you've got 2 large straights on this circuit. The centre straight, of course, our opening run down towards turn 1, and then between Williams and Brundle, you've got the Bentley straight, which we were just on there. That is where I expect to see the bulk of performance come in for brands like Chevrolet and McLaren, where we know straight line speed is a huge buff for those 2. It is one of their strongest points among several. So looking into the sort of the perspective of Velorio, of Flop, of Labey, of Helge Leon, of those drivers with McLaren and Chevrolet, that could be one of their major opportunities. And we've seen how strong the starts are already from McLaren and Chevrolet over several runs here in GT4. So heading into this round, it could be no different. So Wells across the line, 13th fastest at the end of free practice. The 58 shortly to the line on an improvement of nearly a whole second there from 9th. He'll be up plenty of positions by the end of free practice. But next comes the discussion of the qualifying session. You can see slightly brighter conditions, and with it comes a little bit more temperature from the 12 degrees we had over the course of free practice. First onto the field then goes Cam Walker as the morning mist starts to rise onto the tarmac here in the Snetterton circuit in the very early hours of the morning. 4 a.m. local time here in Norfolk as we head down into turn 1. Onto the discussion then of qualifying predictions. Right now, Labey leads the timing charts with a 1:55.565, puts himself a little under 0.3 of a second ahead of Vladislav Mizin, who for the first time makes an appearance on the timing charts. Asahi Ota, third fastest with a 1:56.075, puts himself only a 10th ahead to the exact there, ahead of Anthony Velorio in 4th place. We've just got word there from Matthew Copsey. Server reset incoming, FYI, race length didn't save. So we'll be back with you in just a moment's time there, folks. That's mighty embarrassing. We'll be back in just a second. So we are back into the server again, and for those of you wondering what on earth just happened, well, the server was reset because the race lengths, that being 60 minutes for today's race, round 4 of the championship, did not save. So it left us in a bit of a dark spot as to what to expect going forward out of qualifying. That will quickly restart in about 2 minutes' time. You can see the qualifying data there to your right-hand side, and we'll continue to discuss that before the start of qualifying proper. So from behind Valorio is then Timo de Tosto in the top 5 of the 156.490. He's a little, looking at it here, a little over, as a matter of fact, 4/10 of a second to Dion Helgelien in 6th place. Flitzer Flop in 7th. Matthew Kopsy in 8th. Dima Nagumanov in 9th. You can see those two separated by a minuscule 35 thousandths of a second gap between 8th and 9th position, and Carlos Diaz predicted at 10th for the coming qualifying session. Looking around the field, you can see a stacked out grid, and there's a surprise for us here. We weren't expecting to see another Alpine in the championship. Of course, for the longest time, it's been Martin Matinee behind the wheel of the Alpine A110. Looking here, we can see that this is Alberto Aragonese in the number 104, rocking the Alpine Esports livery, and that does look mighty. Now, it's always great to see another Alpine make its way onto the field. Of course, we saw 2 Alpines in round 1, the other one being Gennaro Oliveira, who drove for Alpine in round 1. We've yet to see him since, though. So we may be without our resident Alpine driver, that being Martin Matinee, but we do have a brand new one here for our eyes, the 104 of Aragonese's. We'll see what he can do then in the coming qualifying session, which kicks off in about 40 seconds' time. Looking around the field then, getting an eyes on the drivers competing in today's event. You can see on the field at the moment, we have Christian Lebay, Fabiano Bartoletti, Vladislav Mizin, Wright, Vilorio, Flop, Minards, that being Jordan Minards, Matthew Copsey, Tom Wells, Timo de Tosto. That is always a bizarre one there, that Ginetta's right-hand drive. Carlos Diaz, Cam Walker, Asahi Ota, Alberto Aragoneses, and Dion Helgelien to make a 15-car grid for the upcoming qualifying session of round 4 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. So that kicks off in but a moment's time, so do bear with us, folks, there for the restart of qualifying. So now 20 minutes against the charts, and it's a much livelier start than what we saw just a moment ago. Among the crowd then, leading the charge down out of the pit lane is Christian Lebay. Right behind him, Cam Walker and Matthew Copsey, as well as the newcomer Wright in the number 54. Among them, several other drivers to make their way out onto the field. So as mentioned before, Lebay tops the predicted timing charts there, a 1:55.565. He puts himself a little under 0.3 of a second from Vladislav Mizin. So do expect a bit of a qualifying shootout to come from the top 3 there, as all 3 of those drivers divided by a little over half a second between first and third. And bear in mind, bringing back into the argument that record high reduction for Chevrolet, or record low weight, depending on who you ask. 19 minutes then of a 20-minute session. We'll be on to our first laps in a few minutes' time here. Leading that charge then appears to be Christian Lebay in a bright and early Snetterton 4 a.m. local time. A bit more heat than what we saw over the course of free practice, as mentioned before, our disconnect. With any hopes now, no further complications up into the rest of the session today. And see, in comparison to the tour we saw out of Flitzer Flop with McLaren, Lebay does have to wrestle that Chevrolet just a little bit more. It may have lost a considerable amount of weight coming into this round, but it is still at its roots a muscle car. They are designed to be relatively cumbersome. They're more designed for the straight line speeds. They are, by their nature, a bit more simple construction. Now, that has not stopped Chevrolet from handing it into the minds and hands of the boffins at Pratt Miller Engineering, the same people behind the legendary Corvette C6R GT1, the car that some make the argument was so powerful it functionally killed off GT1 as a category by the end of the 2000s into the early 2010s. They're also behind the creation of the C7R and the C8R, so their surviving legacy as endurance masterclasses continues to this day. And this is but a small offshoot in the ideas thought up in the mad scientist laboratories at Pratt Miller Engineering. Down into turn 1 to start our qualifying session then. We're on board with Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet. Down towards turn 2 we go then. This is going to be a major attacking spot in the last couple of rounds we've been able to watch here from Snetterton. Now this goes over the course of, I think a few months ago, as a matter of fact, towards the trailing end of VSR Phoenix. I believe I want to say season 8, but I could be incorrect on that one. We did find that quite a lot of action occurred down, especially on the first lap, round through turn 1 and into turn 2. There was the 90% of our action was going on in that region there, just because it is quite a tight area coming out of what is one of the widest corners on track. It'll be no different heading into this area. Expect a lot of following from drivers, very close, very tentative racing on their way down towards the more heavy action spots here at Oggies. Definitely could be some side-by-side opportunities, but it really is going to be a case where fortune favours the brave at a track like Snetterton. Now, admittedly, we are dealing with a little bit more width here on either end of it compared to where we were at Brands Hatch, and with width comes the opportunity for 2 or perhaps even suicidally 3 abreast on our way down the Bentley Straight. Now, it's not impossible, but it's in the same way that you could feasibly survive falling out of plane with a parachute. There's not a great chance you will. On your way out of Brundle and Nelson then, on the way through the bomb hole corner in just a moment's time. Down towards Coram then, named after, of course, Dudley Coram, one of the founding members of the Snetterton circuit and a member of the Aston Martin Owners Club. Out through Murray's there, named after famed commentator and journalist Murray Walker. Down towards the line then on the Senna Straight goes Christian Lebay. The first of our times then today, a 1:56.165. Behind him goes Wright to the line in the 54. Then behind Wright is Copsey. Copsey to the line there in the 97. Doesn't set a time. Behind him is Cam Walker. We saw run... Actually, no, it wasn't him that ran off track earlier, but Walker third fastest. Then Asahi Ota second fastest. Behind him is Tom Wells in the Ginetta. Doesn't set a time on the charts. Next down towards the line on what appears to be a valid lap is the 26 of Fabiano Bartoletti with Aston Martin. Then behind him the 104 of Alberto Aragoneses. Bartoletti fifth. Aragoneses on his way to the line with Alpine. Goes third fastest and ahead of Wright and Walker. Then behind him, Dion Helgelian on his way to the line from 15th on the chart. Goes third fastest. Then behind him is Timo de Tosto with the Aston Martin number 58. Fifth fastest for de Tosto. Helgelian up onto the second row on his first lap gone. 5 minutes into the session. Let's see. Next to the line comes the 979. We just missed him there. Flitzerflop fourth fastest now. Next on his way to the line as we speak does appear to be the 119 furthest up the order. That leaves half the grid thereabouts, or a little under half the grid yet to have set times over the course of qualifying so far. We've already burnt into a quarter of our available time. Now 14.5 minutes left to go. We're on with Christian Lebay on his way in through Brundle and Nelson. He's already set the bar quite high here. We are yet to see the response by the number 1. Vladislav Mizin remains in the pit lane, the only driver of this 15-car grid to be inside the pit lane at this time. What could there be going on that is so important for him? What is he plotting inside the paddock? He's on his way out, so we are about to find out exactly what the Ukrainian was cooking up in the number 1. Down towards the line comes Christian Lebay then. 1:56.165 to beat. 14 minutes left to go. He crosses the line and puts an improvement on that into the high 1:55s. Next to the line comes Wright. He's down to 7th after his first flying lap. As he crosses the line, doesn't find an improvement. Copsey does though, and up to 4th. Then behind him, you can see arriving to the line here, the number 41 of Anthony Valorio, up to 2nd fastest. Then behind him is Asahi Ota, who takes it right back off of him. Then Cam Walker in the background here to the line, remains in 10th place. Wells in 11th. Behind him comes Jordan Minards in the 23 and goes 11th fastest, pushing Wells down to 12th. Next to the line comes the number 26, if I'm not mistaken there, but that being Fabiano Bartoletti. Then the 104 of Alberto Aragoneses in the Alpine, up to 2nd fastest and within half a second of Lebay's fastest time. This is remarkable stuff from Alpine. We do lament the absence of Martin Matinee on the grid, but what a debut we are seeing here from Alberto Aragoneses in the number 104, the only car right now to be within half a second of the fastest lap. All in the meantime, de Tosto now down to 7th fastest as Flitzerflop usurps position for 6th. 32 crossed the line but a moment ago there, that being Carlos Diaz to start his flying lap. We are about to see the start of the flying lap here from Vladislav Mizin. So as one of the heavy hitters expected on the charts here, we just see with Lebay, who is not too far away at all. Takes a big slide, though, on the exit of Nelson. That's going to bring an abrupt end to this current stint. Let's get on board with Vladislav Mizin. The number one then on his way through Murray's. This is a hotly awaited time here. We'll see precisely what he can do in the wake of things on his way down towards the line then. Hunting down pole position yet again. Here goes Vladislav Mizin onto his flying lap. So starting things off already very quick. As you can see, he's burning his way into his free practice times. On his way down through turn one, he's already up a tenth, now 2, now 0.3 of a second on his fastest from the previous session just gone. So we'll take that improvement with a grain of salt because we're not sure if it's sampling the free practice times or if it's sampling his outlap. In that case, it's always going to be faster. So on his way now out through Palma, on his way to Agostini. Current time to beat 1:55.9 by Christian Lebay. It is very stereotypically gloomy British weather we're seeing here. I mean, it looks like something out of the apocalypse, but no, this is really just how the morning looks in the UK. It is very grey, very misty, very Silent Hill-esque here in round 4 of the championship. As he now barrels his way out of turn, looking at it here, 7 at Williams on his way up the Bentley straight, now towards Brundle and Nelson. Saw a little bit of struggle through Sector 2 for Mizin, but now he's seemingly tied everything back up in a nice neat bow on the exit of Nelson on his way through the bomb hole corner. Now down towards Coram. Now this can be make or break for a lot of flying laps here because it's very, very easy to enter this too quickly, go in a little too fast and understeer and not line yourself properly up for the run. He's got to be all the way to the right-hand side before he flicks it in there, past the apex on the left at Murray's on his run down towards the line then. So it's a 1:55.9 to beat for Vladislav Mizin on Christian Lebay as he heads down towards the line here. He's incredibly close and he's up to pole position at 1:55.872. So that is remarkably short, the gap between himself and Lebay at this time. 28 thousandths of a second there over the course of that lap just gone. What is the rebuttal then by Lebay with 10 minutes left to go? He's down the centre straight on his way to the line, I think at the moment, to start another flying lap. So we'll catch on board with Valorio behind him just as he crosses the line there. No improvement for Lebay as he's on to another flying lap. Valorio across the line and no improvement there. Asahi Ota, same story as he crosses the line. Still in 5th fastest. The 818, Tom Wells, next to the line. Can he get ahead of Cam Walker? Across the line, couldn't find the time necessary. Those two split by 7 thousandths of a second for 11th place. The number 4 on his way to the line at the moment as we just see a big step out through turn 1 for Wells. Helge Leon into the pit lane, so no new times for the Chevrolet number 4. 1 of 2 in this round, the other being Lebay up in 2nd place, former pole position occupier. The number 32 making their way to the line at the moment. Let's catch on board with Carlos Diaz in the number 32 Aston Martin. Next onto the timing charts. Right now, the only driver left in this session yet to have set a time on the charts. So for Diaz, a lot of expectation there for where he could find himself, currently aiming in and around the times of Cam Walker and Matthew Copsey. He wants to be around, for a start of things, inside the top 10. We'll see exactly where he lands now on the exit of Murray's on his way down the centre straight to the line. Where does the 32 place itself here after his first valid flying lap here in Snetterton? It's 11th fastest, so dead on, exactly where predicted for the 32. Diaz just outside of the top 10. You can see with the gap at the moment needs to make around 9/10 of a second on Copsey and is very, very quickly into another flying lap. They're carrying all of the momentum necessary. The 26 in hot pursuit from behind at the moment on track, fellow Aston Martin Fabiano Bartoletti in 15th. The 97 is next towards the line here. So for Matthew Copsey, he does not want to be shown up here in the Porsche by a brand new driver piloting the same machine. You can see those two sharing the same stretch of tarmac. Copsey v Wright for 9th position. Down to the line, no improvement for Copsey. Is there one for Wright? No, same story from both of them. The 104 then, Alberto Aragoneses next to the line, couldn't find an improvement over that last lap. Timo de Tosto still behind Vilorio and Helge Leon in 8th now, down from 7th. The 119 of Lebay across the line couldn't find an improvement on that last lap. Is on for another one. 7.5 minutes left to go. Mizin had that one pinched to within hair's widths there by 1:55.872. 979 crossed the line a moment ago. Flitzer flop 4th fastest there. Put himself in between Ota and Aragoneses. So next on his way to the line, we're back on board with Diaz, now out through Brundle and Nelson, but is forced to cut the chicane. Now, I don't think that'll be the first time we see that today, as it's very, very easy to underpin your brakes into that section of the track. Fortunately, with a lot of grass run off there, it's a very easy opportunity for drivers to make a safe rejoin by the time they hit the bomb hole corner on their way to Coram. 7 minutes left to go then. Diaz is still going to be able to sort of spool up for one more run here, roll the car back towards the line, albeit with a little bit muddied tyres. In terms of temperature, even though they are up from free practice, it's not really by enough of a difference for there to be a significant change for vehicle performance. We're up from 12 degrees, and we were expecting a little bit higher, but it's currently only residing at 13 degrees. Looking back into the regulations for today's race, of course, we're in the 20-minute qualifying at the moment, of which there is under 7 minutes left to go of that. In terms of racing conditions, now, the weather here is reported, I believe, for the race itself, not for qualifying or free practice, hence why we've yet to see 16 degrees even be suggested in ambient temperature, but we can be certain that there is no chance of rain here in Snetterton, though the conditions would definitely tell you otherwise. 54 next to the line then. Let's see if we can catch on board. Just across the line went the 54 of Wright, but going up to 4th on the improvement of the ages here, Matthew Copsey in the 97. Now putting himself between Flitzerflop and Alberto Aragoneses. Lebay back to pole position. De Tosto from behind him as well fails to find another position right now. It's been a bit of a down and out quali for Timo De Tosto. We mentioned before he's not finished yet outside of the top 10. There are still chances for him to keep that record lively, but he could very well start outside of the top 10 by the way things have been going as of lately. The most recent story then, up on that front row, Lebay retakes pole position from Mizin. It's going to be a very interesting second row here, because you take a look at the brands that were expected to suffer the most coming into the balance of performance patches for today's race, and you can see that when put into the hands of Copsey and Aragoneses, Alpine and Porsche have seldom suffered here in Snetterton. Sadly, our timer has reset, so we will have to quickly just patch that out. So yeah, we've been able to patch that one back in. That was very, very quick. We caught it right at the 5-minute mark here. So 5 minutes left to go in qualifying for round 4 of the championship. I do tend to forget the fact that with that timer, because it's a very basic Lua script, when we cut away from it, it's not global tracking, so it just resets whenever we come back to the main feed. So that's a mistake on our end. We'll try and patch that up in the future. 5 minutes left to go then. We're on board with Alberto Aragoneses as one of the most compelling stories of qualifying today. The Alpine on debut here. Aragoneses had signed up for round 1 of the championship, but we have waited so long now before seeing the Spaniard on track today. We've waited right now 4 rounds of the championship in. We're already at the season halfway before we've seen the first appearance on track by Aragoneses, but he has really wowed expectations. Copsey now up and ahead of him, but you can see the gap between the pair of them is so minuscule there. We're talking a factor of about, looking here, I want to say 38 thousandths of a second. Aragoneses couldn't find that on that last lap, so this will be very closely decided between Copsey and Aragoneses on that second row. And as mentioned before, those are the two brands expected to suffer under BOP. Porsche and Alpine with 22 kilos apiece there. Neither of them seem to be struggling too much, as right now it's a story on a completely separate end between the front and second rows here. Christian Lebay and Vladislav Mizin in a world of their own, but that gap has really been towed in. I was not expecting a gap like that to form up between the pair of them, considering you were only talking hundredths and then thousandths of a second therein between these two up until very recently. To be forced back out in a 0.2 of a second, it's going to be a bit of a lump in the throat from the number 1. He pulls it in there. He slows down out of Agostini, and he lets Aragoneses get by on his way down towards Hamilton. There could be quite the hopeful story on that second row. Now, I don't think anyone is going toe-to-toe with the kind of race start performance we've come to see out of Chevrolet and Mercedes over the course of this season, but I'll be damned if Porsche and Alpine aren't going to give it a very good go. 3 minutes left to go then. Aragoneses on his way down the Bentley straight will catch on with the Spaniard at the end of this lap coming. Let's get on board, though, with Matthew Copsey on his way currently in through, by the looks of things here, Oggies on his way to Williams. Again, that gap still very short between the pair of them. The 26 next towards the line. Let's see if we can catch on board here. Fabiano Bartoletti comes into trouble on the exit of Murray's. So next will be the number 54.
of Wright, one of the new drivers on the grid. In fact, the only new signing for round 4 of the championship. This is his debut drive here, and to be inside the top 10 is already an achievement in its own right. He's only 0.05 of a second away from Villorio, so as he makes his way to the line, will it be 8th position for Wright? Sadly, not this time around. 2 minutes left to go, functionally a lap, or perhaps even 2 left in the tank for him. The 104 across the line couldn't find an improvement. That was Alberto Aragoneses on his way across the line with Alpine. The 58 of Timo de Tosto crossed the line and is still stuck at the back of that top 10. So it's very frustrating for him over the course of qualifying today to find himself dropping more and more positions, even though there doesn't seem to be any noticeable downturn in performance on the car. It's just a case where the Aston Martin isn't gelling super well with a track as flat as Snetterton. It is much more used to corner banking, a little bit of leverage here and there to where it can work with its own weight. Right now, it's stuck in understeer central when it comes to Snetterton, and that seems to be a story reciprocated for the most part by his fellow Aston Martins, all comprised towards that back of the field, bar one exception being Asahi Ota, who went from 5th to 3rd fastest there, now up and ahead of Copsey and Aragoneses. In the closing minutes of qualifying, Asahi Ota could yet find himself in the talking points for pole position today. He has put himself within half a second of pole position. Right now, the gap's still very lively, still very open, and could slam shut at a moment's notice. Villorio now makes the 2nd row, so better late than never for the 41. The American in the McLaren puts himself 4th fastest, behind Ota, but ahead of Copsey and Aragoneses, who now form up a very exciting story of the 3rd row. So all is not yet lost for Porsche and Alpine. They may be expected to suffer, but 3rd row, I mean, you really can't argue with a result like that. 40 seconds left to go. We're amongst the final laps of qualifying today, already retiring to the pit lane and residing for positions. At the best of times will be 8th for Dion Helgelien, 13th for Tom Wells, and 15th for Fabiano Bartoletti. We see there, Copsey calls it potentially quits here. He's going to have to race against the clock with 20 seconds left to go. I'm not sure he'll be able to get to the line for the end of qualifying, so it may be 5th place at the best of things, and he'll have to pray that Aragoneses does not find the time necessary. 38 thousandths of a second we're talking for control of the top 5. Aragoneses is into the pit, so Copsey is secured for a top 5, at least against the Alpine. Now, we've yet to consider one of the other pressing factors being the number 979 that's currently right behind him, but I believe that could be the end of qualifying there, as checking in with Flop, I believe it was a invalidated lap. So yes, that is the story for Flitzer Flop. Next to the line then comes Christian Lebay. So he's 225 thousandths of a second clear of Mizian. That's 2 tenths, 200ths, 5 thousandths to be precise. On his way to the line, can he open up the margins any further here? Is there going to be any kind of pushback from the number 1 that's currently out on track? There could very likely be the case, as he puts it up just north of 3 tenths of a second. Asahi Ota resides to the pit lane for 3rd place at the best of times. Villorio could yet still have something to say here, as exactly a tenth of a second from the 55. The 41 is gunning for 3rd place. This is the margin he has to clear. 100 milliseconds to the line here. And sadly, not even a smidge on that standard. He'll be starting at least on the 2nd row, but behind Asahi Ota. He'll need a fantastic start, which we know the McLaren can give in droves, but it's going to take right place, right time here, especially on that run down towards riches. It can be a real make or break area, as we saw over in GT3 quite a few seasons ago in VSR Phoenix. So watching with Vladislav Mizian, one of only 2 cars left on the track, the other being the 58 of Timo de Tosto. De Tosto has ambitions to see himself further than 10th position. Vladislav Mizian, on slightly higher ambitions, is still gunning for pole, but the world's weight is stacked on his shoulders here, and for Mizian, you can find himself very, very close to the contention of pole position. Needs about 3 tenths, I think it's 320 thousandths precisely, and right now finds himself scratching around that margin. Needs a lightning offensive on the exit of Murray's here. You can see clawing closer and closer and closer, close, yet no cigar, so it appears, on his way to the line. That is sadly the end of the line for Mizian. He did give it his all there and was divided only by 72 thousandths of a second to the line. De Tosto retired the car at the end of qualifying starts, currently 10th. We'll be on to that discussion of the grid in a moment's time. So better late than never when it comes to the qualifying today. It was an engaging one. Lebay on pole, Mizian 2nd, Ota 3rd. And that compelling story on the 3rd row of Copsey and Aragoneses, that could be a real kicker down in a turn 1. We'll be on to the discussion that in a moment's time. So just looking on the track map whilst we wait for the grid to form up, I'm looking at those major attacking spots. Of course, first and foremost, Montreal at turn 2. I'd say you could definitely have a look around Riches, but that's really only a lap 1 concern here as to whether or not drivers could hope to stave off or gain positions on the run through turn 1. I think as the race continues, that will quickly dissolve as an option. It's definitely going to be a case, like plenty corners here, that fortune favours the brave, and they will definitely have to try for more risky manoeuvres than clean ones when it comes to turn 1. Turn 2 then is our first major attacking opportunity. Palmer into Agostini could be our next opportunity, as it's a series of straightaways, smaller straightaways compared to what we get on the Senna or Bentley straights over the course of this track. And in the straight line speed department, of course, we mentioned before, Chevrolet and McLaren find themselves the fastest of any brand on the field, but it would be naive to not include the obvious, being Mercedes and Aston Martin sharing a platform and engine, or sharing a platform in regards to a powertrain, that being the 4-litre bi-turbo V8, first developed by AMG and then produced as an export model for Aston Martin, the M177, over the Mercedes M178. So, as we enter the discussions of the formation grid here for round 4, the championship here in the HCCL GT4 Challenge. Here is as it stands. Christian Lebay on pole position in the 119 Chevrolet, Vladislav Mizin on the front row in the number 1 Mercedes, then behind them Asahi Ota in the 55 Aston Martin, and Anthony Valorio in 4th in the number 41 McLaren. Then on that third row, a very poignant story going on here. The two brands expected to suffer today, Porsche and Alpine. Matthew Copsey in the 97, Alberto Aragoneses in the number 104, Flop in 7th, then in the number 979, and rounding out that 4th row, Dion Helge Lien, the only other Chevrolet in the championship so far. He's in the number 4. Right, our new driver of today starts in 9th position in the 54 ahead of season regular Timo de Tosto. Carlos Diaz in 11th puts himself up and ahead of Cam Walker in 12th. Tom Wells in 13th starts alongside Jordan Minards for that 7th row, just outside of the 7th row, and at the back of the field, 15th place for Fabiano Bartoletti. So with just about 50 seconds left to go, 20 of which before the 30-second warning where the drivers will be starting their engines. We could even see some pit lane starts here if drivers don't hurry along. We know that the starts here are quite quick when it comes to championships. We've seen some leagues take up to 5 minutes to get this grid formed up. And these drivers here, they waste absolutely zero time. So we'll be on to that 30-second warning in just a moment's time. We'll be getting on board with Christian Lebay, the pole position sitter for round 4 of the championship. Has yet, as mentioned before, to go for a win in this. He's been very, very close to it. We thought it could have been in the bag for him in round 1 in the wet and wild conditions of the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. That was ultimately taken off of him, while the 55 Aston Martin, who lines up on that second row and actually directly behind the 119 there. You can see nestled amongst the crowd, the AMR green there on the 55 of Asahi Ota. So on with Lebay. You can see Ota in his rear view mirror, as well as just creeping around to the left-hand side of his central mirror there is Anthony Valorio in the grey and yellow. So taking us away then on the formation lap, the pole sitter for round 4, Christian Lebay. We know what his starts look like, and we've seen that pound for pound, when the lights go green and we go racing, is one of the fastest drivers off the line in terms of reaction speed and in terms of vehicle potency. Down towards turn 1 is a serious bruiser, and he's been the case over the course of the championship, where he's had astounding starts. As a matter of fact, looking back into the talk of things in previous championships we've covered on the course of this week here, if you were to look back into the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America series, that second run at Watkins Glen gave us a remarkable story indeed, where it was 3 abreast down into turn 1, and leading after that section was Lebay, and that was a lightning start by the 119. I'd never seen the like of it. Could he find himself in a situation like that, maybe on the receiving end with Ota and Mizin backing up onto him in the twin Mercedes powered cars there? The Vantage and the AMG GT, I'm not entirely sure, because he now finds himself in the best seat of the house here, and with very clear line of sight ahead of him. Now, we mentioned before as well, pit lane starts could be a possibility, and it has caught someone out, and sadly, it's our newcomer, the number 54 of Wright, into the pit lane, and we'll start from the pits for round 4. So that's not the not the greatest way, I should say, to end one's qualifying endeavours, is to end up throwing it all away to start in the pit lane. Looking from Asahi Ota's point of view, he is praying that something goes on that front row, and it gives him a very early advantage for the race lead. If anything is to happen down at Riches, it will be Mizin and LeBay hearing the blunt end of it, as opposed to Ota and Valorio, who comprise that second row. They stand to gain the most out of these two getting elbows out into Riches. Currently making our way out of Williams down the Bentley straight. Ota, like Mizin, is going to be clinging to the coattails of that Chevrolet if he's still behind him by the time he makes his way out of turn 7. As onto the Bentley straight, this is the first of many opportunities for LeBay to start forming up a solid gap here. These straightaways is where the Chevrolet lives for. And down towards Brundle and Nelson, he can form easily a few tenths of a second on the Mercedes or the Aston Martin, so they will be religiously committing themselves to the slipstream. We could be seeing a very easy form of a slipstream train for at least 6 to 7 positions on our way down towards Brundle and Nelson, and that can definitely lead to some elbows out, some real hairy moments for these drivers, as it's a very unpredictable area to hit the brakes on. It's a curved braking zone for a lot of these cars. That can upset the balance very, very easily, so a lot to be discussed in the coming race here, an hour against the marks here in Snetterton. So not a lot left to talk about as we make our way around Corums into Murray's in a moment's time then. This is going to be one of the most tense starts I think we've ever seen, because this can very easily decide the outcome of the race going into the next hour for LeBay and Mizin. Could it be the start of Mizin's run to a hat-trick of victories? Could it be the start of LeBay's first victory since the end of Season 2 in GT4? Well, we've got an hour to find out here, folks, and it could be answer 3, and there could be another driver in the mix to come through for a race win. But without further ado then, with 14 cars on track, one from the pit lane, we go heading down towards the line here for round 4 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge here in Snetterton. We're green and racing, an hour against the clock, and a great start from the front row. We're away here in Snetterton. LeBay leads from Mizin. Valorio has a fantastic start. Mizin looks for the inside, already down into Riches at turn 1. Further down the line, it looks like Valorio is up to 3rd. He's up and ahead of Asahi Ota as we head down into Montreal. Asahi Ota side by side, though, with the 41. You can see in the back on the Aston Martin, getting side by side with the McLaren. A little bit of bumping and scraping down the order. A few drivers caught up in the mix there. You can see spiralling off track into the grass is Carlos Diaz. We see here with Dion Helgelini rejoins as well. Has also been knocked down a few pegs there from the race start, but nothing too major. So it's LeBay from Mizin, Ota, Valorio and Aragoneses in the top 5. I must say, a man who has snuck through there, I believe. Oh, never mind. The data has quickly updated itself. That did have me a little bit confused, as we do see, no, as a matter of fact, my eyes do not deceive me. That is Tom Wells inside of the top 5. There was contact there between himself and the number 58 of Timo de Tosto, so not great for the Aston Martin. I still have yet to figure out how on earth has he done that. Tom Wells started from in, I believe, 11th position, or at least towards the back of the field, finds himself now up into that fight at the top 5. He's alongside Matthew Copsey on the exit of Williams. Very nearly made contact there with the back end of the 97. Up ahead of him is Alberto Aragoneses. Right behind him is Flitzer Flop. You can see the night and day difference on straight line speed between McLaren and Ginetta. That is Flop walking by and could even find his way up towards that Porsche in front of him. But to no avail. The 23 next in trouble. Let's get a look down the road here. There was trouble for one driver. Jordan Minard's on his way down the Bentley straight, ran into a spot of bother with the cars around him. Timo de Tosto we saw get into contact there earlier on the way out of... now I want to say there was... I want to say Oggies. I might be mistaken there. So looking at where things stand right now. LeBay from Mizin, Ota, Valorio and Copsey now. Flop having made his way up a position. Aragoneses now down past Helge Leon. So he was the newest casualty on the field. How on earth we missed that, I do not know. There's so much to process and not a lot of time to do it. Already just under 3 minutes into this race, and a lot has shifted for quite a few drivers. Right now, looking onto that front row, Mizin v LeBay around Montreal. Now, we know how precise Mizin likes to drive here. He can get himself to within millimetre precise parameters to the opponents around him. He's really one of the best drivers I've seen to pound the pressure on to his adversaries. He is a very tough cookie to crack. So on his way down towards Agostini. You can and see almost manhandling the car in through Agostini. He's wrestling control away from the Mercedes. He's making the car work for him. It's this very forceful style of driving that you don't often get to see in GT4. We see these drivers come into this with a lot more nuance. This is a driver who, like Lebay in front of him, has walked the walk, and these two know GT4s very, very well. So it's great to see two drivers at the apex of their ability go head-to-head on a track like this on their way out of Williams. They're practically pushing each other in through turn 7. Asahi Ota is slowly dropping behind the pair of them, potentially into the arms of Anthony Valorio for a fight of third place coming up in a moment's time. You can see that theory was spoken on earlier. Theory will only take you so far, but there you see it on paper has now become reality. Lebay just soars away up the Bentley straight, and he's immediately caught back up into the corners. The Chevrolet is gaining prime advantage on those straightaways. The Mercedes still right with him. Down into Corums, there could yet be an opportunity for him to get side by side. He needs to keep himself almost religiously within the lines of the Chevrolet to stay in that slipstream for as long as humanly possible. Now on his way down towards Murray's. What can Vladislav Mizin think to do here? The 119 gets down on the accelerator. The 119 getting away there. It is all systems go for that Chevrolet because it really does just take off like a rocket down the center straight. Already opening that gap up. He's 2 tenths faster over the course of that lap alone, despite being caught up in a great majority of those corners. Mizin cannot go faster for love nor money at that time than Christian Lebay, who leads that charge. So 5 minutes into the session, we'll cut away from the front rows. We can see things start to liven up here. Matthew Copsey could be under attack very shortly by Flitzir Flop in the 979 against the number 97. Porsche versus McLaren for 5th place. Meanwhile, further down the line, we can see that Tom Wells has got the world's weight on his shoulders. Further down the line from them as well, a battle for 9th position between Alberto Aragonese and Cam Walker. You can see the size difference between these two, and a perfect switchback, so it appears, down through Palmer for Aragoneses, puts himself to the inside for Agostini. It's going to have to be something very ambitious here in the back pocket of the 24 of Cam Walker. He's going to try the long way around the outside, but he just can't find the kind of oomph that the Alpine has. That titular little Alpine has got him dead to rights on his way down through Hamilton. That was fantastic by Alberto Aragoneses. Already on the comeback drive. Admittedly, he's been knocked down a peg from where he started. He was on that 3rd row. Was knocked down in the opening laps, but he's already back on the charge. For Cam Walker, he does find himself in a bit of an unfortunate spot because now he's lost a lot of time fighting with Aragoneses, and it's invited in Timo de Tosto to return to the top 10. So looking further up the road from them now, as we still see that front row now on their way through Coram down towards Murray's. Lebay unable to shake off Vladislav Mizin. He's stuck to him like a bad habit here on his way down towards Murray's. As we enter lap 3 of the race, just over 5 minutes in. Much better exit by Mizin. He could put himself side by side here, but does he really dare to try? Knowing the moment he gets himself out of the slipstream, that Chevrolet can open the taps and really kick him out. Now down towards turn 1. In that last lap, now 2 tenths faster in favour of the Mercedes. So Mizin is finding his groove here against the Chevrolet. The number 4 into the pits. That was immediate trouble on the way, but we're still watching with the front row around the outside for turn 2 at Montreal. Vladislav Mizin is already eyeing up a move as we head now from turn 2. He couldn't find the space for it to keep to the inside by turn 3 down through Palmer. So he's in hot pursuit here of Christian Lebay for the fight of the race lead. Let's stay on board with the Chevrolet leading that charge. The man who started from pole position continues to hold on to the race lead here, but for how much longer? Looking on the wider spectrum of the field right now, you can see it's Lebay v Mizin up on the front row. Ota could be finding himself in a fight very shortly with Valorio. Copsey in a fight right now with Flop. Wells in a fight with Walker at this time. Right now still has his hands full with a rapidly approaching 104. That's Alberto Aragonese. Second time's the charm once again around the outside, and now holds his position ahead of the 104. Back up to 8th for Cam Walker. Looking back in with our front row though. We'll keep an eye on the rest of these fights as they progress. That is definitely one to discuss there for 8th position. Walker v Aragoneses v De Tosto, right down to 11th. Diaz 12th. Bartoletti up to 13th. Minards 14th. Helge Lien was the man in the pits, the number 4 in trouble earlier on in today's session. We're still watching with that front row. And now this is all actually playing rather nicely into the hands of Asahi Ota, the Japanese driver in the number 55. You can see tucked away in the background behind the fight on that front row is gaining ground because these two are running into quite the sizable hurdle being each other. Lebay's faster than the Mercedes of Mizin in a straight line. Mizin's faster than the Chevrolet of Lebay in the corners. Neither of them are able to find that point of equilibrium, that perfect balance, as it were, for a great lap time. They've got themselves stuck in a rule of extremes. As they cross the line, they find themselves 4 tenths apart from one another, and Asahi Ota is slowly drawing in the gap here. There could be 3 cars yet to discuss in the fight of first place. We'll catch on with these two just after turn 2. I'll catch on with these two later after turn 2. As we see, this could be the deciding point for a future move here, but Mizin still stuck in behind Lebay. I do want to get a look, though, further down the line. Alberto Aragoneses in 8th place, ahead of Cam Walker, and now right as we see Timo de Tosto into the pit lane, the 58, in trouble. Right, we can see scribbling around behind the 24, the BMW of Cam Walker. Carlos Diaz is eyeing up a top 10 as we speak as well. Looking further around the field, there's of course that fight going on for 5th place. Copsey v Flop, the Porsche versus the McLaren. Really, I do want to try and stay focused either with this fight down here, as it is a 3-man fight, all divided within just about 2 seconds front to back, or that of the front row of Lebay v Mizin. You can see those two heading out of Williams. You can see a great run out of turn 7 for the number 1, but he's all stuck in behind the 119. As you can see, even in the slipstream, that gap is starting to open up more and more and more. There is really, in this argument, no replacement for displacement. Mizin runs wide, though. My word, overcooking the brakes there. Mizin runs all the way over, rejoins just alongside Lebay. He's going to slot back in behind, but he's lost a lot of that momentum he's been spending the last 10 minutes building up towards, and he's dirtied the tyres there on his Mercedes. And with the conditions reportedly under what they were reported for the race start, that being now what was 16, now 13 degrees for the drivers, it's not going to be playing particularly nicely into the hands of Mizin here if he does any more damage to those tyres, because he's already struggling to keep heat in them as it is. These drivers having to run a little bit more extreme setups in terms of tyre pressures, and that can very easily lead to a slippery slope here. One major mistake and one slide, that's a whole new set of tyres you're going to be needing by the end of the next 3 laps. Mizin, you can see that is the straw that really broke the camel's back here, because he's dropped a lot of time away from Lebay and he's lost a lot of ground to the advancing 55 of Asahi Ota. That could yet be a discussion in the fight for the race lead. These three still incredibly close to one another. It would be naive to not include Anthony Valorio in this equation as well. He's not too far away at all. If something goes on in that top 3, he'll be the first to know about it. Looking further down the line then, we wanted to pay attention here to an upcoming fight. This is Aragoneses versus Wells, the battle of the featherweight cars then. Ginetta versus Alpine. Ford 3.5 litre Cyclone V6 versus Renault 1.8 litre TCE Turbo inline 4. Also behind them at the moment is an incredibly close fight. That was between Wright and Walker. We can also see Diaz getting involved as well. This is all for those positions just north of the top 10. That's for 9th place for Cam Walker. We see Diaz looking up the inside of Wright. Wright's giving him the room there past the apex. Diaz up the inside, but stunts his momentum there. That could give Wright the way around the outside down into Hamilton. How does it unfold between these two? It's Wright from Diaz. Wright runs off. Diaz takes position there for 10th place. Great work in the middle sector. Looking back up into that top 3, they find themselves in en passant here. A bit of a stalemate, as it were, between the top 3. Lebay still leads. Mizin second, Ota third. All of this is starting to reel in that top 4 into being a very, very close fight for the race lead, and it would be also naive to not include that present fight going on behind them, Copsey v Flop. If anything, like mentioned before with Valoria, if anything happens in the positions above, they'll be the first to know about it. And there'll be definitely some talking for these two to be had. Aragoneses, he has worked incredibly quick. Before we've been able to catch the fight between himself and Wells, Aragoneses is already past. He is working like lightning today. Lincoln, you'll miss him. That is a remarkable performance so far from the 104. 2 of the pit lane runners then at the back of the field, Timo de Tosto and Dion Helgelian. Early pit lane runners for emergency purposes there. They've already taken their pit stop. They know 48 minutes can be done on a single set of tyres and on a full tank of fuel, so there's very little threat for them later on in today's race. Looking back up on that front row, Christian Lebay from Vladislav Mizin. Asahi Ota on the second row. Anthony Valorio is slowly gaining ground back to Asahi Ota. So there could yet still be a fight for the second row. Could be for 3rd place in this race, but that's a bit of a distant conversation right now compared to the things on display. That's the fight right now for 5th, right behind them being Matthew Copsey and Flitzer Flop. These two very close to one another, but much like what we've seen up in that top three, it's dead heat at the moment, a total stalemate. These two drivers incredibly close to one another, but something's got to give, and so far, nearly 15 minutes into today's race, nothing has. Looking right now further up the order, you can see these two still absolutely glued to one another, but nothing has yet changed between LeBay and Mizin. Walker into the pits then, that is a peculiar one. We can see the indication of front damage. I think there may have been an off that we didn't see there for Cam Walker because he is now out of this race. He's already expressed his distaste for a circuit like Snetterton. I think I can roughly piece together what's gone on for him there. But what that does mean for the cars behind him, for example, Diaz, that's a free position. For Wright, that's a free position. Bartoletti, free position. It's pretty much free positions all the way back. In that last interval, Mizin lost 3/10 on LeBay, but he's gained all of it back through Sector 3 on his way down the centre straight. Let's see if we can get on board with these two. They find themselves half a second apart from one another as they head down the centre straight towards turn 1 as we start lap 7. In that last lap, you can see considerable boosts in performance there for LeBay. 2/10 faster than Mizin after lap 6 just gone. Just watching on board here, because I do find this quite compelling to observe from these drivers. As a matter of fact, let's see if we can get a very, I'd say in these broadcasts, very underutilized camera, and that's the helmet cam here, because it just gives you a little indication as to how the car's performing through the corners. It gives you a little bit of that roll, a little bit of that pitch, gives you some understanding of the body language on display from the Mercedes. A little bit harder to tell from the external cameras. You can see though, the rotation is very, very sharp and almost immediate there for Mizin. He's got that car dialed in for very aggressive cornering. You can see there the indications that he's having to wrestle the car almost out of rotation as he enters a sharper corner like Hamilton. So he's got cornering nailed down to a precise art here, and you can see it's really make or break as we saw earlier on in his run in towards Brundle and Nelson. He's still having to wrestle the more prevalent parts and prevalent flaws of the Mercedes platform, namely its braking is not great. I wouldn't say terrible, would definitely say there's worse cars on the grid when it comes to stopping power. Down into Brundle, then into Nelson. You can see it's a lot sharper than the Chevrolet, and it's this noticeable difference in driving style between these two. With Mizin, you can see it's very urgent, it's very hostile almost, the way that he basically forces the car to do what he wants. And for some drivers, that's just a natural thing. I think for us, it looks unnatural because we're just seeing the raw inputs. We're not seeing the thought process that goes behind it. But what it is producing, as you can see right now, is incredibly sharp performances that he's able to stay so close to a car as quick as the Chevrolet and not lose considerable amounts of time. And as a matter of fact, in that last lap, he gained 0.4 of a second over LeBay. So that really does stand to reason that the aggressive option often does work. You've really got that car, you've got to have that car nailed in terms of its setup. Eyeing up a switchback there, but it just ends up pushing the Chevrolet through turn 2. LeBay parks himself on the apex there. Good hold up by the 119. As a matter of fact, I do want to get the perspective of the other car in this leading fight. We see into the pits, though, goes the 104 of Alberto Aragoneses and Tom Wells. Now, we just saw a high ping warning for the 104. Could that be the indication that he is disconnected? I don't currently know at this time. So we'll have to catch up with them later on as the situation develops. So we're now on board with LeBay. You can see the difference in driving style on a very similar section of the track. LeBay fights the car a lot less as it turns out. When you enter those corners, he's not having to shake the car out of an over rotation. He's got that car almost designed to understeer a little bit more than oversteer. It's a sort of Alonso-esque driving style that's not super popular in GT3 racing anymore. Good morning to the people joining us in chat. You joined us now just over 15 minutes into round 4 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge here at the circuit Snetterton. Right now leading the charge from pole position is Christian LeBay. Right behind him, Vladislav Mizin. Asahi Ota in 3rd place. Anthony Valorio in 4th. It's a very, very close fight up front and has been going on for nearly 18 minutes here in round 4 between these two. and absolutely zero signs of stopping at this time. Further down the line, Matthew Copsey in the top 5 right now and has been very closely monitored by the car in 6th place, the 979 McLaren of Flitzer Flop. Wright, our new driver of the field, the number 54, is now up to 7th and ahead of Fabiano Bartoletti. Jordan Minard's in 9th place. Tom Wells exits the pits in 10th. Timo de Tosto in 11th. Dion Helgelin in 13th. And I believe likely disconnect there for Alberto Aragoneses and Carlos Diaz. The pair of them find themselves in the pits for a much, much longer time. We saw hyping warnings, and there goes Aragoneses. So I think that's pretty much proof in the pudding there that we've got disconnect problems for some of these Spanish drivers. Now, before we miss them, let's catch back on board with our front row here, the deciding factor over who reigns supreme here in Snetterton. Looking at the stakes on the table here right now for Vladislav Mizin, he's hunting his 3rd win in a row. He leads the championship after not showing up to the opening round, but a series of back-to-back wins at the Nürburgring and Brands Hatch has put the Ukrainian at the top of the championship order. For Christian Lebay, the man we're watching with at the moment in the 119 Chevrolet, he has gone 3 rounds into this championship without a win, was just cheated out of one at round 1, lost out in the last couple of laps there to an advancing 55 of Asahi Ota. The Chevrolet just couldn't cope in the wet conditions in Monza. Missed out by such a narrow margin at the end of round 1. And round 2 as well had a less than ideal start, was caught up in a major calamity on the opening laps that was spurred on by a half spin turned full spin for Matthew Copsey. Collected several casualties over the course of that race. For Brands Hatch, it was just a case that he couldn't match the pace of the Mercedes behind him. But now it seems that that situation has been flipped on its head here, much to the chagrin of Vladislav Mizin, who was looking rather happy at the idea of a 3 race win in a row. A hat-trick of race wins, I should say. But we've seen with the fervour in the drive of that number 1, with just how aggressive he's been behind the wheel, manhandling that Mercedes into form, and has been incredibly close here, piling the pressure on to Lebay over the course of this race. There is still a great chance for the Ukrainian to take the race lead, but it's going to take something well above and beyond the call of duty of what's expected of the Merc today. As you can see down the opening straights and then on the back straights at the Bentley straight after turn 7, that Chevrolet just absolutely slingshots away. Try as he may, slipstream or otherwise, you are not getting past the Chevy on the straights at this time. So he does spool a lot of that aggression into that opening sector. You can see going earlier on the brakes and covering off the inside. He knows now that Mizin is going to try almost every single time the opportunity presents itself to go up the inside at turn 2. It's one of the easiest overtakes one can do here in Snetterton. It's one of the least risky, I would definitely say, as with these MSV circuits there is obviously that risk factor one considers when going side by side. In theory you could go side by side in all of them, but not without great risk to both yourself and the driver you're attacking. Agostini, another one of those corners. We've seen side by side maneuvers over the course of this race so far. We saw one from Alberto Aragoneses on Cam Walker earlier on before they head into Hamilton here, this sharp left-hander at turn 5. Now through turn 6 at Oggies, into turn 7 at Williams. And it's here on the Bentley straight where all of that progress is either made or broken, because a good exit here of Williams will keep Mizin with Lebay. But now as you can open the taps, 6.2 litres of all-American muscle there up against 4 litres of AMG precision-engineered twin-turbo V8 power. It's just not enough for Mercedes to keep pace with Chevrolet on the straights alone. Looking further down the line, we can see with Asahi Ota, an onlooker to this fight at the moment, has been tapering off his performance here, knowing that right now, given the intensity up on the grid, it would be a rather foolish decision this early on to go and try and challenge for the race lead. I think he is waiting for an opportunity to arise, much to the chagrin of his contemporaries on that front row. Into the pits then dives Vladislav Mizin after a very intense opening 22-minute stint here. With 38 minutes left to go, he's into the pit lane. Lebay continues to lead. Asahi Ota up to second. Anthony Valorio up to third. Looking further around the field there to see where the rest of our fights could be coming from. We also see into the pits there Flitzer Flop, who was part of that fight with Matthew Copsey for the longest time on the track so far. You can see very close to one another at the moment. Could be fighting for position very shortly. The two Aston Martins that started towards the back of today's grid, that being Jordan Minard's and Fabiano Bartoletti, the 23 and the 26, could find themselves in arms for what is currently 8th, soon to be promoted up to 6th there after they get around Flop and Mizin. Timo de Tosto, he finds himself 9 tenths up the road from Tom Wells in the Ginetta number 818. Carlos Diaz running into trouble after Williams. Now on the exit of Nelson. Looking at where we stand here, we do have quite a few DNFs over the course of this race, 2 to be precise, one of which more recently being Alberto Aragonese's. We did start off with a 15-car grid. And I believe we've just lost another one there because we're now down to 12 cars. So that's 3 DNFs over the course of today. I think the other one just being Carlos Diaz. That's the end of the road for Diaz. After what was a great move earlier on in today's race, we did see out of Diaz, sadly, all for naught. Seems to be primarily a concern at this time with the Spanish talent on the grid. I'm not sure what's going on in Spain at this time, but something is clearly affecting their connection to the internet. As we saw, it's been primarily the Spanish drivers because now we've just seen it with Diaz. We saw it before as well with another Spanish driver, Alberto Aragonese. So we have no idea really what's going on there. Asahi Ota takes the lead of the race as Christian Lebay is into the pits. Now he's done this primarily to match the strategy of Vladislav Mizin, who we saw take a run into the pits only 2 minutes ago. Back into the session now is, I believe... Actually, no, I thought I saw another one into the session. I think I'm actually going a little bit crazy at this time. So... as we now enter the halfway mark of the race, about 6 minutes out to be precise, we are starting to see the bulk of our runs into the pit lane, and much earlier than we've seen over the course of the last couple of rounds here. And it seems to be a case that with Snetterton and with the more colder conditions to what we have seen over the course of the last 3 rounds, it is forcing drivers to make those earlier calls to the pit lane, because keeping tyre heat in at this moment is absolutely vital. We've seen right now that that strategy has really not worked out too well for Vladislav Mizin, because right now Christian Lebay emerges from the pit lane right alongside Fabiano Bartoletti, as actually behind him will be emerging alongside Jordan Minards. So there is still a sizable gap to be spoken of between himself and Mizin, the 2 former occupiers of that front row. Right now in the middle of it all was one of the drivers we were expecting to see to fight for position very shortly with Bartoletti. That's Jordan Minards in the 23 Aston Martin. Behind him you can see, just making his way out of Montreal, is Vladislav Mizin. So there is your gap physically on track. There's a lot of time to be made up for after a risky early strategy by Mizin. Could this have broken his tie of race leads over the course of the last 2 rounds? That record that he's been clinging to over the course of this season, looking for that hat-trick. Everyone wants 3 in a row when it comes to race wins, and it may have just fallen out of Mizin's hands unless he can really pull something out of the bag here. He's going to have to start moving heaven and earth in the next 35 minutes before the checkered flag. For Lebay, he finds himself nestled amongst the Aston Martins that formerly made up the back of the field on his way back to the top 5. Fabiano Bartoletti is right in front of him and will be incredibly vulnerable down the Bentley straight here. You can see the difference between the 4-litre and the 6.2. You can see it is just a night and day difference. When the Mercedes with the same 4-litre engine as this Aston Martin here was following down the straight, admittedly Bartoletti just saw the Chevrolet come up alongside him and was like, I want absolutely no part in what he's having, and actually backs himself up into Minards. But for the longest time there, you can see when the Chevrolet's the one following, it is just breezing past. He moves past the Aston Martins like they're standing still, but when the Mercedes is up behind him, it just can't budge. It won't get any faster. If anything, it starts to lose time. All he's doing is softening the blow by the time it gets to the next corner. This has really been the perfect storm for Chevrolet today. Now, looking back into those balance of performance statistics, it really does tell you the story going on track right now, because it started off on paper with this car not only being fastest in a straight line on a track with 2 very well-defined straightaways, it is also now one of the lightest on the field, thanks to a 40-kilo weight reduction under balance of performance. So all of this has been the perfect melting pot for Christian Lebay to come forth with a race lead and could take home his first race win this season in the next 33 minutes, but there'll be a lot more to talk about on that in a moment's time. You can see Vladislav Mizin giving the lights there to Jordan Minards. Now, technically, Minards doesn't hold any right to move out of the way, but he's, I think, going to do it out of a matter of professional courtesy. Technically, he doesn't have to do that, even under strategy. Bartoletti may be instructed to do the same, and I think since these two are being good sports about it, I don't think Bartoletti's going to be putting up too much of a fight. I could be wrong, though. On our way down to Hamilton, he has actually forced a wedge between himself and Vladislav Mizin. Down through Hamilton we go. very close there. Mizin up the inside on the exit of Hamilton, dives for Oggies. And it was risky, but he's made that one look very, very clean. Number 1 then, up into 6th. Now nothing standing in his way between himself and Christian Lebay. And we've seen how fast he can be around the corners, but on these straightaways is where he's losing all of his time. And now without the graces of Slipstream to soften the blow, he is going to have to start moving like it's Formula 1 in through most of these corners to extract anywhere near the amount of performance necessary to reel the Chevrolet back in. Bear in mind, these two are doing all of that whilst nurturing a brand new set of tyres. We see as well Minards and Bartoletti side by side down into Rundle and Nelson. Those two very nearly getting side by side for position all the way through, backing out just before Nelson. Bartoletti down in what is currently 8th, Minards in 7th. That is actually an improvement for position for Jordan Minards. He has done that very nicely, as a matter of fact, on the exit of Murray's now. Could there be that run into the pit lane for Minards? No. For Bartoletti? Yes. Background there, Flitzer flop under strategy is finally going to gain the position on Bartoletti in his charge back towards the top 5. Speaking of the top 5, Asahi Ota remains out at the front of the field, still yet to have taken a run into the pit lane. Anthony Valorio makes 2nd place with Matthew Copsey in 3rd and Wright in 4th. So our new driver on the field finds himself now on the 2nd row, 13.2 seconds at the last interval away from his fellow Porsche on the field. Christian Lebay makes the top 5, could be back up to the race lead in the next couple of laps here under strategy alone, with 4 cars in the way between himself and a race lead after his pit lane run 5 minutes ago. Looking 8 minutes ago, it was 7 minutes ago, I should say, for Vladislav Mizin for his pit stop, puts him now 4 seconds away from Lebay. As mentioned before, without the benefit of being able to soften the blow on the straights under Slipstream, he's going to have to put 110% into those corners now over the course of the next couple of laps here to put himself within arm's distance of Lebay. Even then, over the course of what was a 22-minute stint between these two, where they were absolutely neck and neck for the most part, Mizin just couldn't find any wiggle room on the Chevrolet. He was stuck in an almost permanent checkmate. If he got out in front of the Chevrolet, he would be almost immediately vulnerable when he got out of, say, for example, Murray's onto the center straight, or if he got out of Williams onto the Bentley straight. He would have to have cemented that position after a straightaway, which right now, we've seen time and time again, the Mercedes is incapable of doing. The moment he gets out into the side draft, he's screwed. The moment he gets up and ahead, he's screwed. So, for all intents and purposes, Mizin is stuck in a very difficult conundrum here. He is basically going to have to be praying that Lebay crashes, because that is probably the best opportunity he's got right now to get around Lebay. And that's not of any fault to Mizin. We've seen already the prowess on display from both of these drivers. They're in a league of their own here amongst the HCCL paddock. These are two of the finest talents I think I've ever seen for GT4. And that was, with great respect to a lot of the drivers I've seen, I've never seen drives as focused as that of these two. And one that plays off of one another's strengths and weaknesses. It is so visceral, that dance between the pair of them. It almost feels real, like you're watching a real race between two real drivers in real cars. There's something very organic of it all. That sim racing, for the most part, up until this championship, has failed to replicate in my mind. But right now, despite all of that talent, and despite how hard he's been able to push that Mercedes, the fact is there's no 6.2 litre in that Merc. And that is what's costing him the race right now. It is not man, it is machine that is deciding today's round. And that is of no disrespect to Christian Lebay, just as much as the same sense as Mizin, a fantastic talent. I would go as far to say is platform defining, as one of the greatest on console. In my time as a commentator, I've never seen a drive so brutal than that of Lebay in GT4. Look over in the Competizione Performance League and look at the statistics, and up until this round just gone, he had never gone below first place. That, in some people's mind, you can consider that a turkey shoot. If you look at who's on the grid for CPL, it is not too far what you're seeing here. So that is definitely quite a point to prove. But that car is definitely doing things for him. And I've spoken with Lebay on several occasions. The Chevrolet is it's a preferential choice. He likes the American muscle car. He likes the Chevrolet. That gels best with his driving style. And you could see it as well, the night and day difference between himself and Mizin. It's this more relaxed versus this more aggressive drive. We're just seeing here with Asahi Ota. as heading down the opening straight, Lebay is up and past. Will Ota find himself sandwiched in between himself and Mizin? As a matter of fact, yes, he will. So Asahi Ota up a position to second. So very cunning strategy on his very silent run through the pit lanes. The Japanese talent, the winner of round 1 of the championship in Monza, now finds himself against the indiscriminate wrath of the number 1 of Vladislav Mizin. He has made himself a victim here. He is a victim of his own successes in terms of strategy, because he's now found himself with both barrels of that Mercedes facing down the rear bumper of his Aston Martin. That cannot be a comfortable sight. Right now, for our newcomer, the 54 of Wright leads the charge as the only driver left on this field yet to have taken a pit stop run. So we are seeing a championship-defining drive from all 3 of these drivers here. Now, will this go on to have significant impact further down the line? I make no hesitation in asserting that that is definitely a chance here. We are looking at the 3 podium sitters, all divided from front to back by 12 points in the championship. If Lebay finishes where he is, he goes up and ahead of Ota, could even find himself at level standings with Mizin if Mizin stays behind Ota. So these drivers do stand to gain quite a lot out of this round right now. Of course, very early on in the grand scheme of things, as we head just in towards the end of the first half of the championship, we've still got 4 more weeks of racing to define that championship, and with how tight things have been in that top 3, I'd say we are long from over. But this could be the start of a great shift in the power balance here in the HCCL GT4 Challenge, and I for one relish the opportunity to see it play out in real time. Lebay leads that charge then. Ota under insurmountable pressure here as he attempts to fend off second place from Vladislav Mizin. Looking further around the field just to see where our next fights could be coming from. Near fight going on at the moment between the 41 and the 979. That could be one to discuss. That's the 2 McLarens as well, Vilorio and Flitzer Flop. That could definitely be one for the ages. We're back on board with Mizin, but I want to get a look on board with the defending point of view as a driver who's gone relatively under-discussed in amongst the wave of fights going on that front row. In the incredibly claustrophobic fights between Lebay and Mizin is the discussion of Asahi Ota. Now, he still finds himself second in the championship. He's off by currently 10 points to Vladislav Mizin. In the position he's in, he'll be able to narrow that gap down, but I think right now could lose position out to Lebay. The gap between those two, only 2 points as a matter of fact, to make a 12-point gap on the podium overall. Where Asahi Ota is standing right now is not too shabby at all. He's going to be sort of playing the fine balancing act here, and we know that the Aston Martin has definitely been struggling through Snetterton. Brands Hatch was a different story as well. A lot of the MSV circuits, you know, despite being a British machine, it is struggling on home soil, and Asahi Ota, for all intents and purposes, a fantastic driver, just can't extract the performance out of what is an aging platform. Now, Aston Martin has gone on to now replace this with the facelift Advantage Evo GT4, which we can't sadly have in this game. That's over, I believe, on iRacing at the moment. If it's not the... actually, no, it'd be the GT3 one that's on there at the moment. The GT4 will shortly follow. And right now, he is working with machinery older than he'd like to be in terms of it, but fortunately, compared to where things stand in GT4, a lot of these cars, at least in the DLC, are introduced around that same time. The Aston Martin actually finds itself to be alarmingly one of the newer machines on the block. That Vantage introduced in 2018. The Mercedes behind it introduced a few years before that. The Chevrolet up the road from them as well, same story, a few years before these two. But this is an interesting conversation to have right now, because we are looking at a much closer fight than what we saw between Lebay and Mizin. Now, what do I mean by this is in the fact that you're no longer dealing with an engine advantage. These cars run identical motors, and we've explained it several times, but we'll go at length to explain it again. Mercedes developed the 4-litre twin-turbo M178 engine, and because of Daimler, their parent company's partnership as one of the key investors in Aston Martin Lagonda, the 2019 Aston Martin Vantage, also the 2018 Aston Martin Vantage, the new model that we see on our screen at the moment, was given a 4-litre twin-turbo V8 from Mercedes. Now, this was slightly tweaked in a few different ways to make it fit the Aston Martin and fit the parameters put in place for Aston Martin Lagonda when they were producing the new generation Vantage, and hence it dropped the M178 engine and was called the M177. Now, some of these changes are more preferential, and it was more to integrate a new exhaust system different to the one we see on the AMG GT4, and that's what gives the Aston Martin and the AMG their two distinctive notes, despite being at its core the same engine. We're watching here with Asahi Ota, that winner in round 1, and he's really been able to open the taps here on the Aston. I think Mizin is starting to show a little bit of a sign of burnout here. We do see a little bit of a knock, though, over Nelson, so I think I may have spoken a bit preemptively. Mizin's up to 3rd, but what could Asahi Ota do now that he's in the slipstream? He is looking for a move up through Corums. It is side by side between the Mercedes and the Aston. Down into Corums we go, out of bomb hole into Corums, now into Murray's. Asahi Ota, from a world-class switchback, takes it back, but could it be 2 switchbacks for the price of 1? We're out of Murray's, down onto the centre straight, very nearly contact between the pair of them. Mizin right to the back end now, as this is the fight for 2nd place. Into the pits went right in the number 54. Ota very nearly lost the mantle of 2nd place, but he's right back onto it. Looking over that rear spoiler, a little bit of grass on the left-hand side of Vladislav Mizin's Mercedes has stunted his performance. So nearly made contact there down through turn 2 at Montreal. So this is incredibly tight between the pair of them. There's no advantage on engine. It's the exact same motor, just different ways to utilize it. Both of these cars have aimed for roughly the same kind of core structure. Now, of course, they don't share a chassis, not that I'm led to believe here, but they do share the same kind of core philosophy. This is a mid-rear engine. What does that mean? It means the front of the engine sticks out just at the front axle line. It gives it a lot of rotation. It's very pointy in the corners. It gives this remarkable, almost mid-engine like poke, at the caveat of still having the stability and predictability that comes with a front engine platform. Mercedes has been using it for quite some time, since the SLS, and continue to use it today with the AMG GT. Aston Martin, no stranger to this philosophy as well, continue to use it in the Vantage. I did say earlier on we didn't have any news to speak of, but I do now seem to recall Aston Martin on GT3 pole in Fuji in the World Endurance Championship, and I think definitely a lot more of a peculiar story in my mind is the Valkyrie in 3rd, behind, I believe, 2 Cadillacs. Now, I had to clean my glasses when I first saw this news because, as we all know, the Valkyrie has been one of the most hotly awaited projects in the world of endurance racing. I would definitely say in the world of motorsports, the Aston Martin Valkyrie has been one of the most hyped additions to any grid. And it has had, let's be completely honest with ourselves, an incredibly underwhelming start to its career so far. But, and this comes at quite a sizable but, it has shown great potential in the last couple of races. Now, this is admittedly minus the caveat of the Lone Star Le Mans. We don't talk about the Lone Star Le Mans, where the Valkyrie, I think both Valkyries were out of that one. We are starting to see Aston Martin finally understand what the point of their car was. Now, it finds itself in a very odd spot because it's technically an LMDH and a Le Mans hypercar, in the same way that the Ferrari 499P is technically both of those things because it has a partially co-opted chassis design. In the same way with Aston Martin, part of their chassis design was co-opted by Multimatic, the same people who have done the Porsche 963, which is a fantastic car in LMDH. So over the course of 2 championships, WEC and IMSA, Aston Martin has slowly been able to build up more and more confidence with the Valkyrie. Ultimately, at its core, it was always going to be an LMH. It was a hyper-experimental idea. Very few brands have come from the woodwork with a hybridless car and done anything in regards to success. I mean, all you need to do is take a look at a few of the teams that are no longer with us. Your Van Walls, your sort of Fraschinis. I mean, looking even further back to the LMP1 era, your Ginetta with that hybridless LMP1. You don't have to look too far to see that this concept at its core didn't really work. And I think that's because a lot of these brands lacked the thing that Aston Martin has. Money. Lots of money. And the best aerodynamicist in motorsports. Now that they have both of these things. I definitely see the Valkyrie looking to potentially take home. I would say I want to be hopeful and say a top 5. Of course, we don't yet know. Fuji is right around the corner, and there's a lot waiting on the line for Aston Martin. But enough about the discussion of the World Endurance Championship, as we are still in the fight here in round 4 for second place between Asahi Ota in the Aston Martin Vantage up against the sister car then, the AMG GT4 of Vladislav Mizin. Looking further around the field then, with just under 20 minutes left to go, Lebay leads by 5.1 seconds, Asahi Ota in second, Mizin in third, Flop in fourth, Vilorio fifth, Copsey sixth, Wright in seventh, Ditosto eighth, Wells ninth, Helgelian in 10th, Bartoletti in 11th, and Minards in 12th. 3 DNFs over the course of this race so far here in Snetterton. So out through Agostini, down towards Hamilton. Asahi Ota has been able to hold his nerve remarkably well so far. And we've studied the drive so far of Mizin and of Lebay. But let's get a look at a third perspective of things here. As you can see how omnipresent that Mercedes is, you can't see really anything else in the rear view mirror on that Aston Martin than that of the front grille of the Mercedes AMG GT4. So now we get to see, how does Asahi Ota's driving style fare up against the other two? Where Lebay's is a lot more relaxed and working with the weight of the car, and Mizin's is working almost conversely, counterflow to the weight of the car, forcing the car into rotation and then snapping out of it. Almost a rally-esque drive if I had to draw direct comparisons. Let's see how Asahi Ota's favours up against these two. And so where we've been testing a lot of that information was down in Sector 1. We're currently in Sector 3 here. You can see there's this gradual steering style, and we've seen it on a few different drivers, but I think we see it most pronounced here with Ota, as he does find himself right up against the ropes here. A bad exit out of Murray's does put him side by side, but he is on the inside on the run down towards turn 1. So all he has to do is keep the foot planted and hope that the other one backs out of it, because this could get incredibly hairy between himself and Vladislav Mizin. Down towards Riches at turn 1. Mizin could be going for the later apex of the two. As we see that start to form up, Asahi Ota parks himself on the apex, now moves centre mass of the road to cover off an offence for the inside. It's going to force Mizin to run all the way around the outside. So when we were hoping to analyse some of the driving style, we've actually got a little bit of an insight into the way he defends for position. So now into this area, we saw this sort of gradual steering process, and you can see this there, that teetering on the wheel. He's just edging the wheel forward, trying to find that little pocket of grip. Now you see a lot in karting as well. You do see a lot of that in the faster sort of karts, these shifter karts. You can definitely see it where he's edging the wheel around, trying to find grip where it exists. Right now it's been basically shoved out of Agostini, properly bullied for position here by Mizin, who was giving him absolutely no room for respite. I mean, how on earth does one operate with this much pressure? That is really just one of the many strengths that Asahi Ota brings to the championship. He is very, very tough to crack. In terms of his resolve, he is incredibly composed behind the wheel of that Aston Martin. He's not happy, that Mizin, though. He is really, really not happy with what on earth went on down in that middle sector. Now, I can't tell you for the life of me what exactly Asahi Ota did wrong there. I think this is a case where Mizin is starting to show those signs of frustration as well. Maybe something did happen, we just didn't capture it from when we were looking around, focusing more on the driving style of this driver here, Asahi Ota. But I think now we're going to cut away from him, because I think we're about to see a very angry drive coming up here from Vladislav Mizin. So we've already discussed at length the driving style here of Mizin. It's very assertive. It's forcing the car to cooperate, really. And now we're going to see on board just from the dashboard here. So no more analysing hand gestures and foot control and pedal cadence. Now is the real rough stuff. How does Mizin go about sizing up this challenge here? He's already been he's stuck behind one checkmate drive. That was against Lebay. Now he has to try and navigate the Aston Martin, who through very cunning strategy has found his way up in front of the Mercedes at possibly the worst time for it, because Mizin took that risk. He took that earlier lunge onto the tyres, and it may have not paid off for him here, as he's actually dropped position from the start. He would otherwise have finished in neutral stead if he finishes in second. With 14 minutes just under left to go, he could find himself losing out the potential lead of the championship to Lebay. Meanwhile, there is another fight going on, and we do want to try and catch on board with it here. So we're going to go to the wider monitors just so that we can quickly snap between the pair of them. Right now, this is the fight for second between Vladislav Mizin and Asahi Ota. I want to pay attention to this one here because it is starting to get closer and closer. Anthony Valorio versus Flitzer Flop. Now, this is definitely a lot... I wouldn't say a lot more interesting, but it is interesting in its own respect when compared to what we've seen out of Aston Martin and Mercedes, currently making their way out through Williams here. You can see practically pushed again out of turn 7 goes Asahi Ota. Vladislav Mizin now eyeing up a move around the outside to potentially swing it over his nose by the time we get to Brundle. Now it's just going to be following in the line, looking actually for the inside, trying to mount some of that pressure on Asahi Ota, but we've seen it's an iron will of that 55. You really just cannot seem to find a crack in the facade here of Asahi Ota's driving standard. He is very, very tough to force off of that racing line. He really only moves off of it if he thinks it's absolutely necessary. So into Coram. No chance there for Mizin. He's going to have to try and eye a chance up on the exit of Murray's. These two absolutely inseparable. I dare say there is a great chance for Mizin on the exit here of Murray's, and that does seem to be the case, but Asahi Ota had a bad run there out of the last corner, but rejoins right on the nose of Mizin and inadvertently has forced him back a distance there. You can see just all manner of light show. He's not happy at all. You can see it illustrated in the way he's now commanding that vehicle around. He is not happy with what's been going on in the last couple of laps. He knew second place, and even first for that matter, was a definite chance over the course of today. Through the incredible defense, though, by the 55, all of that has dissolved away, and you can see the pangs of frustration with every light flash there in the number 1. Now on the exit of Palmer. Down towards Agostini. This is a great overtaking opportunity, but he's just too far back to make it on the inside at the start of the corner. Is he going to try for a very late apex to put himself closer by the time we get to Hamilton? It was looking likely there, but you can see, since both of them are working with the same engine, they've still got the same strengths of that 4-litre twin turbo, and that is fantastic acceleration in those lower speed corners. On those smaller straights, those turbocharged engines are fantastic, but it's contact between the pair of them. But giving the position back, I believe, is Vladislav Mizin. So, you know what, to be fair, given how white hot their performance has been over the course of this race, I was not expecting a resolve to have shown up that civilly, as a matter of fact. I was really expecting one to just barrel on through. I was expecting Mizin to keep going, but you can see he wants to race hard, but he wants to race above all things fair. And that is really good sportsmanship between the pair of them. He's owned up to his mistake there down through Oggies and Williams. And he's adamant now, well, he knows full well that the race win is definitely off the charts for him, but he is going to take whatever position he can the fair and right way. He's not going to be bullying drivers around the track by shoving them out of the way. He has been quite assertive. We've seen him get incredibly close. There has been the occasional bump, occasional ding, but nothing ever deliberate in his efforts to get around drivers. And that is really something you've got to quite respect, I should say. Sorry, not expect, quite respect from the number 1. And now he may have the best opportunity in-house to go for a legitimate move here with very little quarrels down into turn 1. He's right up to the back end of the number 55 of Asahi Ota. Vladislav Mizin, though, forced out of commission to try and go alongside in through turn 1. He'll next size his chances up on his way down towards turn 2 at Montreal. 10 minutes left to go. Here we go, side by side, and backs out of it, forcing the 55 to run on the inside, going for a more defensive line. Then he tucks back out onto the racing line, but ultimately he's just scrubbed more momentum. In the background then, we want to get a look on board with what's been a developing fight over the course of the last couple of laps. This could go nuclear at a moment's notice. Flitzer Flop versus Anthony Valorio, the two McLaren cars for 4th place, are not too far away from that fight for second after the incident on the last lap gone, heading in to Oggies and Williams. Down towards Oggies then at turn 6. This is where that incident kicked off earlier on, but they resolved that by themselves without any need of the stewards to get involved. Neither of them now look to be able to stand in the way. Lebay has effectively had the red carpet rolled out for his first victory this season, and I'm sure he'll be relishing in the moment. Long awaited for him to take the top step of the podium, but he's still got 9 minutes here on track before that's confirmed. So with these two now on what's left of the podium, are fighting in a world of their own. Down through Brundle and Nelson, it was contact between Ota and Mizin. Mizin running way far over the brakes. We'll see how that plays out. We're just watching here as now getting up for position of both the McLaren cars, if I'm not mistaken, there on Vladislav Mizin. You can see there, it was just one bump, one slight misjudgment on the brakes. And that has fallen apart for Mizin. He's now behind both the McLaren cars of Flitzerflop and Anthony Villorio. So we now will be getting on board with Mizin, but now as a part of a fight of 3 different cars here for 3rd place. Flitzerflop, through circumstance and through good determination and great consistency, has found himself on the podium. Anthony Villorio would like a slice of that pie heading down into turn 1. Right in front of them there, not too far away at all. That is the 55 of Asahi Ota for 2nd place. So this has been drawn into a very, very tantalizing fight here for 2nd place overall. Up the inside goes Vladislav Mizin on Anthony Villorio as he tried to go for a move on Flitzerflop in front of him. He still finds himself to the inside as we head down into Palmer. So now trying to take the position back off of Mizin goes Villorio. It's contact between the pair of them on their way out of turn 3. Mizin is not going to be happy with that one. Can see already lights there for Villorio. This has been a really, really frustrating day, so it seems, for Vladislav Mizin. The cracks in the facade of what's been 2 race wins in a row has come apart at the seams here through only some partial fault of his own. You'd definitely say in that last one that wasn't really his fault. He had the right to try for it around the outside, but it did get a little too hairy. Not really sure where to call that as far as things go. So we'll focus on the fight going on up ahead. We're on board then for the first time in a while here with Anthony Villorio in the number 41, fighting with Flitzerflop for what is 3rd place on the track. Asahi Ota now forming a 2nd up the field on that Bentley straight. 7 minutes left to go then, functionally looking at about 4 more laps left in today's race. Could be perhaps even 3 before the checkered flag. Watching with Villorio, this is airtight inside that fight on the podium, because not too far away, sliding his way out of the bomb hole corner in towards Corums, is Vladislav Mizin. Very disgruntled drive now in the Mercedes. And for Anthony Villorio, he finds himself incredibly close to the chances of 3rd place. He wants a shot at the podium here in Snetterton. Now, looking at those results for Villorio over the course of the championship so far, he's 14th in the championship standings. His best result has been 8th place, so this is a real change in outlook for him over the course of Snetterton. And for Flitzerflop as well, he finds himself 5th in the championship. His best result was 2nd place at the Nürburgring in round 2. So Flop back to the podium, or could it be Villorio right now? We've got about just under 6 minutes to determine their fate, and there's a very present factor involved in all of that, and that's right behind them, Vladislav Mizin in 5th place. Could yet be that fight more for 4th place for Anthony Villorio, as he finds himself very vulnerable on the exit of Agostini. Now, we know that Mizin's not too particularly happy to see him, so he's not going to be playing super nice on his way through Hamilton and down into Oggies. So Villorio having to hold the inside of Oggies and forcing the Ukrainian to run around the outside as we head up towards Williams. So scrubbing a little bit of time there, but he'll be right up to the back end of the McLaren, out of Williams' corner and up the Bentley straight. So Villorio very vulnerable, and that could be the same story for Flitzerflop, because a good slingshot here could set in motion that fight back to the podium for Vladislav Mizin. 5 minutes left to go then here in Snetterton, and this has been a very compelling final chapter. A lot has since changed since the start of today's race, and I think the outlook for how things have gone so far for Vladislav Mizin has definitely, it's gone a little bit downhill. He started on that front row. He's now in 5th place. This could change things heading into that 2nd half of the championship for him as he heads up the championship standings. But not by a wide enough gap to cover the damage on display today. If it gets even a slight smidge worse for him, this could wreck his chances at a championship. Now, I do want to pay attention very quickly to something that's going on in the background. And right now, it's between the 2 Porsches, Copsey and Wright. There is that fight going on for 6th place at the moment. We're back on board for just a moment's time here with Villorio and Mizin now on the exit of turn 1 up to turn 2 at the Montreal hairpin. Up the inside goes Vladislav Mizin, holds the position up into 4th place. So Villorio down to 5th. What is the fight back chance for the 41 on the exit of turn 3 at Palmer? Quickly checking in then as we just cut away from these two to see what the state of affairs is going on for our two Porsches in that fight of 6th place. Copsey v Wright, the newcomer to this championship as well. His first race here at round 4, the championship for Wright in the 54, making his way round turn 2. So for Mizin, up to 4th place, now within a second of a chance for 3rd place on that field. You can see up just in front of him there, Flitzer Flop looking to get back onto the podium after missing out in the last race just gone at Brands Hatch, where in which he finished 9th. So we will be amongst the last 2 laps of today, because with Christian Lebay heading down towards the line, this will be the second from last lap. So we're not just done yet here. There'll be one more lap after this one coming for the leading 119 Chevrolet. Right now, it's the story of what happens for the rest of the podium. Asahi Ota has taken very firm command of 2nd place right now. He's held off Vladislav Mizin, forced him to his breaking point over the course of the race today. And now Mizin has the opportunity to retake a podium position. He's in that fight for 3rd place. Let's stay on board then with the AMG of Vladislav Mizin. Meanwhile, the 54 in the meantime of talking is now up and ahead of Matthew Copsey. Now, I just want to quickly draw attention to this, because there could yet be an opportunity coming up very shortly for fight back between the pair of them. We're just flip-flopping in between the 2 fights right now. One for 3rd place, the other for 6th. Checking in here with Wright as Copsey now puts himself in the pursuing position. He's down in 7th after losing out on that last lap just gone. Just checking up the order here as we see Mizin sizing up Flitzer Flop for 3rd place on the field. Meanwhile, Copsey now chasing Wright down through turn 1, potentially on a run into turn 2. Takes a big chunk of grass with him though, so he's not helping his chances here to fight back for 6th place. Meanwhile, we can see for Vladislav Mizin as we head down through Hamilton, looks to go up the, originally up the inside, was almost eyeing up around the outside of Oggy. He's now going for a later apex. Here comes Anthony Valorio, by the way. You can see right behind him the number 41 there, the grey and yellow McLaren, who was knocked out of position a moment ago, is now back into the fight for it, because that fellow McLaren inadvertently has done him a favour and held up the Mercedes enough to where the 41 can come back in and have a go at this fight. So as those 3 enter stalemate right now, the 54's up the road from the 97. Not too far from the fight we've just been watching. Side by side between Valorio and Mizin. Mizin's off the track again. We saw the telemetry get closer and closer. I don't believe what I'm seeing here. He rejoins the track and has had absolutely none of it, as he now rejoins up and ahead of Flitzer Flop. He's not happy with the 2 McLaren cars. He's had enough of all of this. You can see this is the boiling point for Vladislav Mizin at this time. The question therein remains, given the circumstances at play, given that he will more likely than not be punished by the stewards for rejoining and gaining an advantage, is he going to willingly forfeit the position to Flitzer Flop, or is he worried that doing so is going to invite Anthony Valorio, who instigated this incident, back past him? This is a very bizarre turn of events here. As we head into the final lap, you can see he is pumping the brakes just a little bit, because Flop has regained a lot of that distance. How does Vladislav Mizin go about navigating this task? He's in through the Montreal hairpin. We'll have to catch up with them in a moment's time here. Meanwhile, ever since that move by Wright, sadly of which we could not capture, he's gone up into 6th and has opened the taps there on what has been a phenomenal getaway for 6th place. We're on that final lap, so we'll be getting on board with Christian Lebay in a moment's time, as he's not too far away here from taking home his first victory since last season in HCCL in the multi-class. It'll be his first win of the season here in the GT4 Challenge. Vladislav Mizin does not appear to be yielding any more to the McLarens. He's had enough of these two, and there'll be nothing but stern words between these 3 at the end of today's race. Asahi Ota is more than comfortable with 2nd place, though. He'll be advancing his position in the championship, and even more so for Christian Lebay. But we'll be just checking it around the field here as we begin the process to quickly await the arrival of our race leader, soon to be race winner then, as the timers begin to fade away here. We're on board with the Chevrolet of Christian Lebay. He's waited a long time for this one here, ever since the end of the multi-class era for HCCL, heading down in towards Murray's, just short of the checkered flag here at the end of round 4. Better late than never. At the end of the opening half of season 1, Christian Lebay wins in Snetterton. Unbelievable stuff there by the 119. He has had a flawless drive over the course of today. Let's get a look with the rest of our field because there are still stories left to be wrapped up here. For Asahi Ota, it's cunning strategy and great defense by the Japanese talent to take home second place. Vladislav Mizin on a very controversial run to third. We've seen the aggression in the drive, but he has definitely fought for the position he heralds at the end of the race here. That is much to the chagrin of the driver right behind him, showing his frustrations. Flitzer-flop in fourth. There could yet be more decisions made on those positions by the end of today. Anthony Valorio fifth, and right on debut for sixth place. Got up and ahead of his fellow Porsche Matthew Copsey in the 97, right to the line in sixth place. A great start to his endeavours here in HCCL. Not too far away from him then, his fellow Porsche today. Rough ride for Copsey, but takes home seventh. Timo de Tosto on his way to the line, so his ambitions for another appearance in the top 10 came true. He finishes in 8th. That's currently his objectively worst result, despite the DNS in round 1. Down to the line goes Tom Wells. We've just had a few drivers drop out there, so we'll wait for the full confirmation of the finishing lineup here in round 4 of the championship. What a pleasure it's been so far, though. Down towards the line comes Tom Wells and Dion Helge-Lien. We'll see exactly where they stack up in a moment's time. A very controversial end to a fantastic round of racing here in the High Caliber Community League here from Snetterton at the GT4 Challenge, round 4 of season 1. Christian Lebay, your winner in round 4 for the first time this season and for the first time since the end of the multi-class era for HCCL. The 119 atop the leaderboard. Asahi Ota in second, Vladislav Mizin in third, Flitzer-flop fourth, Anthony Valorio fifth, right in sixth on debut, ahead of Copsey and De Tosto, seventh and eighth, Tom Wells in ninth, and Dion Helge-Lien rounds out our top 10. Fabiano Bartoletti in 11th and Jordan Minards in 12th. 3 DNFs for Carlos Diaz, Alberto Aragonesis and Cam Walker. Oh, that's the end of a very, very hot round there of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. And for those of you joining us later on today, we're heading into the penultimate round as we start to draw the curtains on what has been a fantastic saga of racing and a very mixed bag overall in the No Limits Racing League's Solo Multi-Class Endurance Championship powered by Malwa Transport. You'll be joining us from the genesis of motor racing in North America at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, it'll be coming up at around, I want to say 7 o'clock today. Let me just double check the times here. I've had so many events this week that we tend to forget exactly where things ought to be. Let's just get a look here for you real quick. That'll be in about 2 hours, 54 minutes at 7 o'clock BST on September 27th. So coming up later on today will be the next round for us here on TRTN. If you're joining us just for HCCL action, bringing up the calendar for the season, you'll be joining us next on October 11th at the Circuit Zolder into that second half of the championship for what is going to be a very exciting next set of rounds. Those 4 rounds yet to follow can decide a very close championship so far. It has definitely been a big shift in the scales there for Lebay, Ota and Mizin, our 3 current top 3 drivers, separated by only 12 points coming into today's round. A lot is about to change. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your day and take care. Good night.